things that is really interesting about crypto is there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy type model going on, where not only is it extremely exciting technology, not only are we seeing really, really exciting early markets, but also it's so exciting that it's bringing, a good majority of the smartest people in coding and in finance that are coming up. People that are growing up now are less used to a traditional banking model, and so you have a huge opportunity to kind of revolutionize what people think of as customary.
If you think there's value in blockchain, would you invest in it today if you know that in 20 or 30 years it will be worth billions? The simplest application of blockchain is eliminating corruption, because you can't play with the records.
Right.
Once it's written, it's written. It could be a private blockchain, it could be a public blockchain. If it's public, everybody has the information. So you can't hide anything. All the inefficiencies fly out the door with blockchain.
I know that right here, right now, over 50% of every American adult wants to be their own boss, wants to be in control of their own destiny. Look around and they say, I just don't know what I should do. That's the exact situation that I was in when I launched my first business. And the tip I'll share with you, if you're an undecided entrepreneur, is this: start with a practice business. And then with that, that can transform eventually into that business that is a passion of yours.
Well, I'm back. Yes, we have a bonus episode. We collected so much great content, and trying to figure out how to organize this content, fit it into these episodes, that's a real trick. And with this particular project, man, we still had some great content. So we created bonus episode 10. Here we are together to jump into it. And let me tell you, just because it's a bonus, don't think that it's anything less than all the other episodes. As a matter of fact, I'm going to wager that there's a good chance that you might think this is one of the best episodes of the entire series. So thanks for showing up for it. I'm so excited to bring you additional information. We're still in our free viewing period, so if you have not invested in Money Revealed 2020, now is your time. The sands of the hourglass are coming down. You got to do this right now, as a matter of fact, if you're really interested in this. So check out the packages that we have. Look at the bonuses we have. We guarantee your satisfaction. We want you to own Money Revealed 2020. But we are in the free viewing period. Episode 10 is being aired right now, and I'm looking forward to diving into that with you immediately. Cryptocurrency. Something you can't avoid today, at least knowing and understanding. Personally, I've recently gotten into crypto. It's a part of what I put my investments into. It's a mysterious place if you don't understand it. And when I heard I was going to interview a very young guy named Jordan Abdallah, I was like, should I get somebody who's got a little bit more gray hair and a little more experience around this? And I couldn't have been more wrong. Jordan is an unusual genius, young kid who really understands the world of crypto and can explain it in ways that bring it to life. It was such a great interview and such a pleasant surprise for me, and now I get to share it with you. So enjoy this interview. Jordan, thanks for spending some time today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. It's great to be here.
What excited you about cryptocurrency? I mean, why this sudden drive? What do you see?
So I think, kind of as a little bit of background, I was a very into public forum debate in high school. Kind of the captain of the debate team, and so I have a strong passion to kind of understand things that I don't quite understand at first. So that's kind of how it started. It just kind of started with doing research for fun and to kind of understand and get a grip of all of it. And then also my family is kind of a very finance-oriented family. My parents met on Wall Street, so kind of once I got a little bit deeper into it, I started to understand this is really something that's revolutionary. It's not just some fad, basically.
Well, so you think it's revolutionary. What are the views of your parents? Do they share your opinions about this, or do they think you're chasing something that's a fantasy?
So I think my dad's very much on the same page as me. We've kind of spent, and my brother to some extent too, although he's more interested in kind of the gambling aspects of Bitcoin.
So he's speculating around.
Yeah,
it.
so
Okay.
he's more interested in kind of, online gambling with it, and that kind of stuff. But my parents are both kind of very supportive, both of me and of the space, I think.
So do you feel like this is a fad? This is something that is going to have some staying power and is going to evolve? How do you see this all emerging?
So that's a good question. I think just kind of from my perspective, I think once kind of a revolutionary idea is out there in the capital market, there's not much you can do about it. I think, the more you see opportunities for variation, for people kind of contributing and putting things forward in the space, kind of inventing and revolutionizing all the time, that's the kind of space that crypto is very conducive to, because everything is open source. And there's a very, very strong brain drain toward the space, kind of from traditional finance, from entrepreneurs. You kind of see a bunch of these people moving toward the space. And one of the things that is really interesting about crypto is there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy type model going on, where not only is it extremely exciting technology, not only are we seeing really, really exciting early markets, but also it's so exciting that it's bringing, a good majority of the smart, the smartest people in coding and in finance that are coming up, that are kind of very much focused on kind of the space. People more in my generation and kind of the generations around me are very, very much, understanding that this is kind of the future. So I think it has to do with the fact that, people that are growing up now are less used to a traditional banking model. And so you have a huge opportunity to kind of revolutionize what people think of as customary.
Back when Bitcoin was maybe at 300, yeah, you're laughing. So I was talking to some friends of mine who had acquired some, and they're very tech-oriented guys, and somebody who built and ran a technology company, so I had some background,
Right.
and I wasn't tech-phobic, so to speak, but but I loved what it represented as far as a non-government controlled currency and what it
Right.
could do in the world. I saw it pretty quickly that this could be really cool. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go and just buy a chunk. Number one, I just want to support it. Number two, I think it might go somewhere. And I remember going in, and it was so difficult for me to try to navigate the acquisition of
Yeah.
Bitcoin that I'm sort of saying, if I'm someone who's kind of somewhat tech oriented, and to me, I'm having a difficult time figuring out, okay, well, how do you get it? How do you
Right.
secure it? How do you put it in a wallet? What do you do with it? It's got to be so complicated. And in my busy CEO life, it was like, if I'm having this much
Right.
problem, I can't imagine a bunch of other people are going to do this. So I think what you're saying is that the infrastructure now is being built out to make that much more efficient.
Yeah, so I think if you look at kind of the early market solutions to problems like custodianship and all those things, you have Trezor, you have Ledger, you've got kind of a bunch of what are cold storage wallets that are pretty effective, but you can't. Someone like Goldman Sachs isn't going to be holding a Trezor. Like that doesn't
Right.
quite track. So you've kind of been hearing people say that institutional money is headed into the space since late 2017. People have been really, really focused on that, and I think what you see is that is still probably at least a year away.
Right.
And I think people kind of want to jump the gun on that. But kind of the more know your customer paperwork and all that stuff gets kind of more digitally logged, kind of hopefully on the blockchain, it'll be kind of more seamless to onboard people onto things like Coinbase. And again, also I think part of it has to do with public perception, right? So the fact that these websites can crash if you have too much spike in daily users is pretty ridiculous. I mean, it's like something like E-Trade would never crash if the
Right.
market was somewhat volatile. So you have to have things like that kind of get hammered out before you can really expect any type of mainstream adoption.
So I know this would be a speculative answer on your part, but do you believe that there'll be a surge again of value in cryptocurrency once this infrastructure starts to make it more consumer friendly?
I mean, generally the answer is yes. I think, if for me, Bitcoin is a store of value. Now, a store of value has to be, it can't be this volatile. So I guess right now it's more of a theoretical store of value, and I guess we'll see kind of if it can hedge against the markets. in the next few years, and we'll see, kind of how the utility of that evolves. But if it is a store of value, and that is a fairly big if, but if it is a store of value, and I think part of what store of value means is that it has the momentum of human history on its side. If Bitcoin is digital gold, which is kind of the moniker that everyone seems to give it, that would make it a store of value utility, or a store of value, which is not really possible when it's this volatile. So we'll kind of see how that unfolds the next few years. But if it is a store of value, and if it is the next generation of store of value, then the nominal price of a single Bitcoin is theoretically infinite, right? Because if it's a store of value, then that means there's no real upside in kind of no upside cap in how high the price can go. Now, cryptocurrency in general, I think the market will swing back in a big way. Bitcoin is more of a question mark, just because people are still wondering. There's still questions about velocity. The proof of work system is not the most eco-friendly and might not be the one that has the most success long term. But from what the market looks like right now, I would say that it's Bitcoin at 7,000 is a pretty good bet. Yeah.
So now, interesting, because you keep referring to Bitcoin, but
Right.
there are hundreds, I think, at this point,
Yeah.
cryptocurrencies out
Thousands,
there.
yeah.
And thousands. Okay. So they're not all. Most of them are going to have to wash out, and there's going to be, I
Yeah.
guess, a few that are left. Is that the way that most people feel about it?
Yeah, so I think kind of what you're going to see is people like to refer to the market as the Wild Wild West,
Yeah.
and that's a very, very accurate representation, I think. You might see 80% of these projects go to nothing, and obviously that's something that's been kind of happening in the space over the last few years. I mean, if you look at kind of the top 10 coins from 2012, you won't see most of those names.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean, like, you look at some of the first ICOs, the first kind of big coins, like you look at things like Namecoin, Filecoin, those aren't as big anymore. And so there is kind of some the utility coins that don't have a clear utility, or that have kind of any SEC gray area clarity will be shut down most likely. And so the interesting thing you have to think about with the SEC is they kind of talk about the level of decentralization a project can have. And this is kind of the idea that the issuer of a token could issue a security because it might be overly centralized kind of in the beginning duration. So this is what lockups are oftentimes trying to prevent, is that if the utility function is going by the time that the lockup ends, then it's not really a speculative investment, right? It's a consumptive use case. So a lot of tokens that are kind of have tried to go down this utility token ERC20 path. One, they depend on the Ethereum network kind of figuring out how to scale pretty quickly, which is still kind of an if. And so yeah, a lot of these projects could kind of be wiped out, and there is still incredibly risky space, but there's a lot of
In
promise.
the end, this only has value if people are going to start using it.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, so how important is the role of vendors starting to accept cryptocurrencies as payment? I know that I think Overstock.com was
Right.
for the first one to say, hey, you can pay us
Yeah.
in Bitcoin. I think Tesla, you can buy Tesla in Bitcoin now. So it's starting to creep out there a little bit. But how much of the bet on this is dependent upon the fact that people will trade goods and services?
So I think it's actually a smaller part of the bet than people think. So I'd say most cryptocurrencies are not necessarily transactional coins. They're meant to give people an ability to create and build applications and decentralized applications that kind of add a level of functionality above currency. And so kind of as people understand what the use cases and what the limits of them are, that's kind of what's going to drive adoption, as opposed to using Bitcoin instead of a credit card at a store. I mean, that's not that game changing, right? That's just instead of credit, which is already kind of an abstract value, Bitcoin is a similar thing. And it's better because it's more subdivisible and it's fungible. Might not be quicker now, but I'd say that transactional coin isn't necessarily what the game is. The kind of limits on what we'll be able to do with currency, it's hard to kind of explain them, partially because we have no real conception for what this might look like. So if you look at like people thinking about what the internet might look like, you can't really kind of predict how it's going to look in a couple of years, because it opens up markets that we've never even seen before. And so that's kind of what, the level of smart contracts and kind of that functionality of crypto is something that's pretty, game changing. We haven't even seen anything like it before. So we have to kind of wait and kind of see what the real driver of adoption is. But I think it's going to be that one, killer dApp, as like people like to say, one application that really onboards people well, and that'll work. And I also think that it kind of runs in cycles of liquidity. So if you kind of stack a bunch of good news, cryptocurrency news in a couple weeks, the price starts to build a couple good days, then you kind of have the hype machine start going, and you have liquidity cycles where the price is going to skyrocket and triple and do all these different things. And then once it kind of reaches the limits of what the infrastructure can hold, then it'll create a crypto winter. And that cycle kind of happens over and over again until the architecture gets built out, in which case I think we kind of stay in that market.
So this is interesting because you're referring to it as crypto, but some of these applications are blockchain, not necessarily
Right. Yeah.
currency based, as far
True.
as the crypto
Yeah.
itself. So how do you separate those two things in your mind?
So when I say crypto, I kind of mean a crypto asset more generally. So a blockchain token or a token that corresponds to a blockchain, the vast majority of them are essentially utility tokens or security.
What do you mean by utility token?
So a utility token is essentially a token whose value and price should come from access to the network or functionality on the network, the blockchain.
Right.
As opposed to a security token, which is just a tokenized security. So, if I buy a token that gives me access to a REIT portfolio or something like that, that's, essentially just a security, just with wider liquidity base. So I think, security tokens.
So the security token you're saying is backed by
Right, it's-
some asset. It's not just the thing that's inherent. That's digital gold.
Yeah.
It's saying you referred to a real estate investment trust saying, hey, this currency or this cryptocurrency
Yeah.
is backed by actual assets in a place,
Right.
And basically the value of those assets will reflect the value of this currency.
So they kind of have a couple gold mines are ICOing under a security token. So you get access to the underlying value of the gold, which I don't see as super groundbreaking. But security tokens do offer people that have never had access to markets really financial liquidity, because it's very easy to set up. A wallet, and it will get a lot easier too. So that's kind of what people don't understand, is that things that are extremely hard to do in niche markets become less hard as they're more traditional markets.
What I see, and tell me if you think I'm right or wrong in this, is that in third world countries, especially like say sub-Saharan Africa,
Right.
and all these countries where you've got very fragile or corrupt governments, that have their own currency, but the currency
Right.
of that country is something that is very kindly undependable. So now, basically, if you're an entrepreneur in that country and you'd say, geez, I'd like to be able to trade in something other than my country's currency, because I could work for 15 years, I can build some
Right.
wealth, and next thing you know, it could be squandered, something completely independent of me. So it brings, I think, the world to the marketplace where government-controlled currencies can't. Does that seem like an accurate aspect of this?
Yeah, so I think we're kind of seeing the world move to a more borderless global marketplace and network. But the place where that really doesn't exist is third world countries. I think people kind of forget that a lot of the technology that's going on there is either stuck far behind or has leapfrogged. So kind of with the example of telephones, they kind of skipped landlines and went entirely to kind of handheld. So the analogous situation would be that there is no banking infrastructure in the vast majority of the third world, and so that's one of the biggest issues. And I think that's a pain point that crypto projects are really going after. There's a lot of decentralized banks and banking applications that are going to basically attempt to give financial services to those kind of populations, and those are also really, really exciting projects. But I also think that you see a premium being placed on the price of cryptocurrencies in markets where the government is not responsible actors or not reliable actors. So I think in Zimbabwe at one point the price of one Bitcoin was like above 11,000, which was like a $4,000 premium above the price of Bitcoin, because like you said, there's such a need to have a reliable borderless source of.
But how? So you're saying that if you're in Zimbabwe, which is one of those countries that has currency issues and has a history of them, you're saying that they would have to pay much more for a Bitcoin than somebody in the United States? I thought
So basically the way it works is if I want to buy Bitcoin, there's a couple of things I can do. I can buy it off of a friend or a person I know in person, which would not require an exchange, would not require any of those things. It's kind of more the kind of a Craigslist equivalent of such kind of I'll give you my Bitcoins, you give me whatever. And the other thing you can do is you can go on an exchange, something like Shapeshift or Changely, which is websites that basically do you don't have to create a KYC profile for those. But the difference is that some of the exchanges and some of the places you can only access from certain VPNs or certain geolocations. So there's some fencing and barriers kind of along the getting access to exchanges, and so that's very hard to do.
But if I'm in Zimbabwe and I have an internet connection,
Yeah.
I can't just set up a.
So you can set up a node. I mean, you can mine. You can do a lot of things to acquire Bitcoin, but there are also situations where you just want to be trading from local currency, local fiat to Bitcoin, and that exchange rate is going to be.
I see what's happening because
right. Because more people in DAO are willing to pay a higher percentage for. It's basically a representation of distrust in the government. So it's exactly what you're saying. I think, and I'm not sure Zimbabwe is even the exact country, but yeah. So your point is very accurate. Like there are too many borders. One, and so to have like a full global market, you pretty much have to have a system that kind of matches up with that, which fiat really doesn't.
So it's very interesting to me because I look at what it would mean to the world to unleash all these entrepreneurs
right.
who just have no path. I mean, there is such a thing as people who don't have any opportunity because of the barriers that are in front of them. And being able to say that we're going to remove these barriers and bring this many more people to a marketplace that can contribute to it, I think it is almost unfathomable about what might happen, like you say about the internet. Like we can't even know what that means. Right. It's an unprecedented thing.
And I think along with that goes the fact that not only the people that are going to be using this is kind of anyone, but if you look at kind of the revolution we've had in fundraising, in access to projects, and access to doing ICOs, I mean that is, in my opinion, also very, very revolutionary. I mean, if you think about the fact that as opposed to having to give away a good amount of equity, having to basically cave into the demands of whatever VC you decide to go with on your series, and then at the same point they you'll get very, very small increments of money. I mean, there's a lot of downsides, and it's very, very difficult to raise money the traditional way. And then you look at the crowdfunding model, which ICOs have raised. I don't even know what the number is, but it's an incredible amount of money in the last 3 years alone. And there's kind of more technology being built out around it. There's a couple ICOs which are actually planning on kind of doing a hybrid model between the two, where you have a smart contract that'll kind of release money over time as opposed to just kind of giving some money. Mm-hmm. But the entire space is kind of designed around an open source network where pretty much anyone has access to funds, has access to coding. I mean, people can build projects, in their basement, quite literally, which is why, so many more revolutionary projects are coming from this. It's that you're empowering everyone to really, anyone who can build on the protocols are doing it,
So interesting, because something just comes to mind as you're describing some of this. If I am a small government, especially if I'm a dictator of a government, I could probably set up all kinds of server farms to start mining Bitcoin and saying, hey, I'm gonna confiscate a bunch of wealth from my country, and I'm gonna get warehouses full of computers starting to mine Bitcoin. Is that going on at all?
Yeah. So the kind of the idea of centralization of the network through kind of collecting a high amount of computing power is a real issue, especially one in the Bitcoin community more so than the cryptocurrency community in general. Just because that is kind of the most ideologically dividing topic, I think. But so kind of what you're seeing is a couple of countries for sure both profit off Bitcoin and also and also all cryptocurrencies, and also confiscate them quite frequently from random laundering or kind of whatever they find, they keep those Bitcoins. And so, some governments, some dictatorial governments have large stashes of Bitcoin, but really not enough to be substantial. And I think the vast majority of them have basically sell them off. So like the United States government, they have auctions for the Bitcoin. And in the very beginning, there was huge arbitrage on those, but eventually people started to realize that's what's going on, and the OTC over-the-counter desks started buying all the Bitcoin. So a lot of it will go back into circulation. Some of it won't. That's just kind of the name, part of the game. I think that one of the biggest issues with governments, and one of the ways this could get derailed, is that if you kind of have a partial revolution where currency just becomes a token that is statewide, something like what you see happen in Russia. They basically just made, or in Venezuela right now, basically with petrol. Those are essentially border confined tokens. I mean, they're not literally confined, but they are essentially backed by the government, created by the government. It's not really the same vision. It's
another government currency as compared to something that's
right.
In a
it's
free
not
market.
The people's currency,
right?
Basically.
And that's kind of the interesting thing. So what I'm very curious about, and I think you've stated it in some ways, but maybe we can dig a little deeper, is how does someone from your generation start to view this, and what's the feeling or the spirit of it compared to somebody from a much older generation like me, who said I grew up in a different way, pre-internet, all that stuff, watch the internet unfold, etc. But if somebody when I was your age said, one day in your future there's going to be currency in the world that's not controlled by any government, and it's not controlled by banks, it's decentralized, there's no broker in the middle of every transaction, it would have been some sort of a science fiction thing, and here we are in it. So I'm looking back on it with but I have filters on because of how I grew up. You're basically born into this.
Right.
So when you are around your friends, your other classmates, and other people that are in your generation in this industry, what is the conversation like?
So the conversation's very interesting. I'd say that if not a good base understanding, I'd say the majority of people that I meet kind of around my age at least know about cryptocurrency, have some general idea of what it is, and have a lot of them have had experience interacting with it in the past. Maybe that's for things that aren't necessarily what it's going to be used for in the future, but
not that legal,
right? Might be fake IDs is probably the biggest way most people know about Bitcoin and that kind of stuff. So I get a lot of those messages.
This is
well.
interesting. So I'm learning something here. So you're saying things like and that's the whole point. What's somebody who's 19 years old interested in an ID that says I'm 21? How do you get that? Well, I got there's nefarious characters that will trade cryptocurrency.
So the thing about crypto and on the blockchain and all this stuff is that it's completely immutable. So something that I do on the blockchain, this is what I tell my friends, is some transaction you make, your private keys can be dehashed at some point, and it can be people can figure out who it was. If they have enough computing power and they have enough time on their hands. So any transaction that is nefarious on the blockchain, has a history that it will stay there forever. So it's not necessarily an issue of the whole connotation of illegality that's going on in the blockchain is not really true. I mean, the percentage of crimes that's kind of occurs through crypto is much, much smaller than cash or credit.
I'm sure. But now you're bringing up another issue, because this is kind of interesting, because basically transactions are in the ledger. Everybody's got it, and it's a permanent record, right? As I think you referred to as immutable.
Yeah.
It's a permanent record,
right?
I guess what are the privacy issues relative to the transactions you make with your cryptocurrency?
So if you follow some basic kind of trading behavior, it's very difficult to kind of find anything like that. And also, Bitcoin is a public ledger. It's an open source. Like you could see it, we could scan it, we could see the log. It's very different from something like Monero or Zcash. Kind of more grayscale technology that kind of hides your traces a lot better. And there are very, very much privacy centric coins. Bitcoin is not one of them. Bitcoin is very much a public ledger. So theoretically, if someone has your address, they have your private keys, they can, they have access to your Bitcoins. They can see how many Bitcoins you have. And they can do that by checking your wallet. I mean,
But you're not a name, you're basically a sequence of numbers.
But, if one of the problems with metadata is that, metadata is going to get very, very good. So, if you have someone who transacts in a certain place or a certain website, constantly, things like that, you just don't necessarily want to be involved in any nefarious transactions that are going to be held forever. Just because that doesn't, it's not a good setup.
Well, it's very interesting to consider, but there's other things that are maybe, I don't know if I'd call them gray, but they're going to challenge the legal system.
Definitely.
Because as the borders come down, transactions can occur, and where a buyer is from a regulatory or legal standpoint, and where the seller is from similar standpoint, they might have different rules and different laws in place.
Right.
And now they're transacting, and is somebody selling something? Well, it's kind of legal for me to sell this to you, but you're not in a place where it's legal for you really to kind of purchase it. And so there's going to be, I think, some things that emerge that are going to really have to cause laws to be rewritten.
Yeah, so the exact dilemma you're talking about is one that is happening in the ICO market right now. So, the SEC is harder to deal with than the countries like Malta.
Right.
So ICO projects you find them more and more going over to Asia for money, and the reason being that they have way less strict investor laws. And so, a lot of ICO projects, especially more recently, just will not allow U.S. customers to take part in the ICO because it's too much to deal with from the SEC, and if it gets determined to be a security, then there's just like a ton of kind of gray area you don't necessarily want to be playing around in. So yeah, a lot of the ICO projects don't accept U.S. customers
at all, even after they're launched.
No. Once they're launched after ICO, then you can trade them.
Now I get it. So and isn't that? And this is bringing to light, I think, a generalized understanding of how regulation oppresses capitalism in capitalist markets. It's saying that, like exactly what you're saying. Hey, I've got something I want to bring to a marketplace. How do you, and it's walking the line, like the SEC saying, well, we have to protect consumers,
right?
But at the same time, we don't want to constrict things so much that we stall the market because nobody can do anything. But if I'm doing an ICO, I'm not gonna, the cost and the time and everything else to try to comply with the SEC. You're saying I can go to Malta and suddenly just launch one there, and once it is launched and established, then I could sell wherever I want.
Yeah, so there are a couple kind of interesting things going on here. First, you see a couple of different areas in the world trying to open themselves up as kind of blockchain havens. And an interesting one in the U.S. is Wyoming. So Wyoming kind of passed 5 bills more recently, or laws more recently, kind of in the last few months, that basically make it the most blockchain-friendly state in America.
Wow.
So there's no, I believe you don't have to have a money transmitter license if it's a utility token. I believe they changed some securities law around. You don't have to pay income tax. And so there's a lot of blockchain-friendly things kind of going on over there, which is really interesting. And also have, series LLCs, which means that you can, set up a Wyoming LLC from anywhere, basically, and kind of get taxed in that way. So there's a lot of really interesting ways people are going to get around it, and that people are going to adapt to it. But I think that, the U.S. government has not done a bad job in terms of crypto. I mean, people like to get on them a lot and give them, a hard time. But in reality, it would be scary, right, to have a currency that fundamentally inverts part of what your responsibility is as a government. They're understandably wary of the technology, kind of from where they're sitting as kind of arbiters of fiat. I mean, they're the ones who control all money right now, right? Basically,
well,
so.
and that's kind of begs my next question is saying, if I'm the United States government and I've got a United States Treasury, I've got a Federal Reserve, and I got control of this whole thing, and now should I not be very scared and nervous about cryptocurrency coming into the marketplace? Like I remember in the infant stages, I was getting very concerned that the government was going to step in at some point and say, we can't allow this. This is, now people are going to be able to trade independent of our banking systems, our Federal Reserve, et cetera. We've got a $20 trillion debt, to consider, the tax implications. I mean, so why do you think the government is sort of like allowing this?
Well, I'd say that at this point, it's gone too far. I mean, in my opinion, there's no way to put the genie out of the bottle. Exactly. Okay. I mean, I think at this point, there's nothing really they can do. I mean, so for example, for a fun thought experiment, if I want to shut down Bitcoin, how would I do that? I mean, I guess I go to the Bitcoin Foundation. I mean, they're not like even directly involved. Yeah. They could all just say no. I mean, there's no real way to a lot of them, a lot of these networks are they run outside of government. They run and not in an illegal way. That they're kind of compliant to every degree, and I think that's going to continue going forward as more and more projects are going to be lauded for following the SEC compliance standards. But at this point, yeah, there's nothing they can do. Number one, and I think number two also, there are some governments that have tried to kind of crack down on it, and those have not really looked great. Like China banning mining. The whole South Korea scare where everyone thought they were going to ban it and they didn't. Russia creating the ruble, or I forget what they call it, but there's some crypto ruble or something that Putin basically created. But so there's a lot of different ways you can respond. I think the world's looking at you, the market's looking at you, and the people that are in charge of the next wave of fintech, they're gonna want to go to the places and they're gonna want to innovate in the places that make it easiest to innovate for them. So I think to answer your question, why would you help these people, is because if you can't control all money, wouldn't you at least want to be on the same side as people that do?
You can't beat them, join them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of thing. But I was afraid they might just try to criminalize it. Say, how would you stop it? Say,
right.
It's a criminal offense in the United States to transact business. It's criminal for a vendor to accept Bitcoin instead of U.S. currency. I mean, they're very draconian,
right.
And I think I think it would cause a revolution,
right.
and a backlash.
But, yeah, I think the United States government deserves some credit here. Honestly, I think to not have responded that way is actually quite fascinating, because I think if you look at the way that just how human psychology works, look at the majority of people who have a vested interest in crypto not working, and those people are waving flags out in the streets, telling us over and over. You look at Jamie Dimon, you look at any of these people. I mean, if you are a big owner of a financial platform that is the equivalent of a bank, of course you don't want that to people for people to be debanked. That doesn't make sense.
Well, but now it's interesting because you mentioned Jamie Dimon, who was the CEO
right.
of JP Morgan, and he was totally dissing
right.
crypto, but now he's entering, right? I mean, aren't they creating a coin?
So they're doing a bunch of crypto stuff. I mean, they released like a 100-page PDF report on the markets and crypto a couple weeks later. I mean, they've done a pretty hard 180 on the whole subject. I think. I think that's pretty fair to say. I mean, I think you look at Goldman; they're about to potentially do a security token. I mean, there's a lot of whispering, and once the market becomes more open to institutional money, then we're going to really see J.P. Morgan and Goldman and all those people. They're not going to come in, for a while. I mean, for them, there's no reason to, right? So they might start to open up trading desks. They might start to do these things, but they're not going to put in a large amount of investment until they know it's safe. There's no reason to for them. They have a corner on the market basically, as far as services go. And so the catchphrase that a lot of bankers have been employing is blockchain, not Bitcoin. Essentially what they're saying is they don't want the technology of blockchain to be connected to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. But in reality, what they're saying is, blockchain doesn't disrupt us. Blockchain helps financial technologies work. Right. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, they replace the functionality of financial services. So, it's hard. It's kind of an interesting situation because you don't really know who to believe, or who is the arbiter of the truth, right? So, for example, there's this interesting website. I think it's called Bitcoin Obituary or something. Essentially, it catalogs every time a major publication is called Bitcoin dead. Right. I think it's has over 200 catalogs of people saying since 2009. So
now you actually started a Potomac Capital, right?
Yeah, Potomac Crypto Capital. Yeah.
Crypto Capital, so tell me what this venture is for you.
So for me, it's kind of a passion project. It's it's for me, like I said, I'm a high school debater. Coming from a finance family, so what my mind loves is understanding how things work and understanding things that are important. And so reading about anything that I think is kind of game changing, that's what I love doing. And so for me, I spend the majority of my day reading about everything that's going on in the markets, everything that's going on tech-wise, all the new papers about valuation metrics and that kind of stuff, because that's still being built out for crypto. Like, there's no real good valuation metrics right now. So for me, it's about an ongoing love for researching and understanding it, And also, I think that I know I can see that this is where the market's going, and I want to be involved in it going forward. And I want to be someone who can say that they were here for this momentous change. I mean, I think if you think about human history and how long it's taken for each revolution of money to occur and each abstraction of money to occur, I mean, it takes a long time for society to change. And if you think about how quick the transfer from cash to debit was, or cash to credit was, I think that might be the type of revolution we're thinking about, where it goes entirely abstract to some people. But the more that you realize that, what we have right now is already an abstraction of wealth. I mean, that's what paper fiat is. It's just a representation of governments, backing that. Other than that, it's nothing, right? So I think people now, my generation, understand that more. You're less ingrained to kind of see things as they are, and you kind of begin to question things more. And that's kind of what the root of debate and research is, which is, kind of what I love to do. So I love, researching just for myself, and the fact that I get to do that with, two of my best friends and potentially make a living for myself at the same time is, just a great opportunity.
So what will Potomac do exactly? In other words, what function are they going to perform?
So basically with Potomac Crypto, the vision is basically to do a private fund. Right now it's just, us and family members. The kind of the legal stuff needs to get, move forward a little bit more to more clarity before we kind of feel comfortable taking other people's money. And, even accredited investors, you don't really want that liability. So what we basically do is a long-short mix, meaning that the majority of our portfolio is long picks that, we're willing to hold for over a year based on what we think, the value of those projects are. So that's, blue chip protocols, this kind of stuff that is kind of the meat of the blockchain investment is that. And then we also have, kind of a smaller percentage of our portfolio dedicated to doing things like day trading, swing trading, tracking pump and dumps, all those types of things are very interesting.
So basically a hedge fund,
so
that's going to analyze this market
Right.
space, and people put money into it, and this is, like you said, it sounds like this is right in your wheelhouse as far as what you get up early every morning and love every minute of it.
Right.
Yeah, which is really, really great. And you also have been interning, to get more experience this summer with DNA.fund, right?
Yes.
So, what any ahas, being there, because now you're around people who are in the investment side of this, because where I'm going, and is the getting to the practical side, saying, okay, now I'm somebody out here, viewing this, and there's a certain amount of dollars I have allocated to invest, and I'm kind of interested in this crypto thing. What should I be thinking, or what what should I be considering? So you're kind of in the heat of it, working at DNA right now. What have you discovered there walking in?
The reason I decided to kind of work at DNA is, I don't get a lot of exposure to the ICO, pre-ICO side of things. It's kind of the more venture capitalist side, basically. And one of the reasons is because we just don't have enough money in our fund to be dedicating any large percentage to ICOs, especially because those can take years to vest, which really doesn't make sense in this market for me at least. But I did want to get more exposure with kind of how to analyze those projects and then meeting the team members and that kind of stuff. And part of the problem is that there's a bit of an information asymmetry with people that are in the community, the blockchain community. That's like the most important thing you can do. If you're kind of if you're a technologist, if you're a markets person, super interested in this, you kind of got to go to conferences. You got to go to these things. I mean, and conferences are a huge ripoff, like honestly. But you have to go for the networking side of things, for the community side, because that's
The rip-off, how the information they provide is
not
not
really
valuable.
the speakers are good a lot of the times, but I mean they bust the same speech out 1,000 times a summer.
Right.
So I think for me, some of them are really interesting to see, and great if you can meet the people and talk to them. That's an added bonus. But just the atmosphere of being there is really what's important. I mean, if you think about it, it's like same as the internet. If you're in Silicon Valley or if you're in wherever the hub is, that's kind of the best place to be because, information's flying around. It might be, your 10 friends are doing the next big 3 projects. Like I'd say that, it's rare that I come across an ICO I'm analyzing where I don't really know someone involved in the project.
Yeah.
And so that side's been, incredible to kind of be part of. And the ICO side of things is super interesting. Like I said, the idea of like an entirely new investment vehicle for people to get involved in early seed, basically IPOing. Like I mean, it's a super, super interesting opportunity for people to be able to invest in ICOs. But what I've
And
kind of
it's
found,
for people who might not understand what an ICO
Right.
is, an initial
Initial
coin
coin
offering.
offering, right.
So what is that? That's somebody who's creating a new crypto,
Yeah.
a new blockchain, and bringing it to the marketplace and trying to get people interested in it.
So the ICO is the token equivalent of an IPO, sometimes called a STO, which is like a security token offering, or a TGE, a token generation event. There's a bunch of different names, and the semantics kind of play into, is it a security, is it a, you know,
Right.
and I don't want to play, I'm not like playing that game, but
Right.
but the the general idea is that an ICO is going public for a coin,
Right.
or for a token, and so people are investing in the project, in the use case that's coming out, and those are open to, you know, any accredited investor right now, and they kind of going forward will probably become easier to access, I'd say. But I mean, the biggest epiphany for me has just been, you know, the quality of the projects coming up, and as far as ICOs and things that I'm seeing is far more promising than what I saw even 3 months ago.
So now, if I'm out there and I've got some money, you know, I've accumulated, maybe I've even got a bunch of money in some kind of a retirement account, or maybe I've got some money stashed in savings, or I have good cash flow, you know, in a business, you know, that I'm some kind of a professional
Right.
or other type of person, and I have everybody whisper in my ear, you got to get into crypto, you got to get into crypto. How would somebody who doesn't know what you know, has, you know, maybe watched this, now they have some context.
Right.
What's the best way for them to approach investing in this area?
Well, I'd say, you know, first you should do your own research. Is kind of a principal rule in the crypto space. You know, we're all self-taught, so people will respect people that are self-taught.
Right.
There are lots of courses out there. There are lots of seminars and things you can do and conferences, and those are all, you know, good ways to get your knowledge up. But I'd say the vast majority of them kind of stick to a pretty base level of understanding. So to really understand what you're doing, you have to kind of take the bull by the horns and kind of read and research and kind of figure out what's going on for yourself. And I think if you do that, some people are going to come to, you know, to different conclusions. And that's not to say that you know, the conclusions that I've made are the only, you know, correct ones. But I think you know, if you're looking to get into the space, whether as an investor or kind of a speculative investor, you know, whether you want to get deep into it, and I think, you know, the answer is the same for all of them. You want to, you know, figure out what the crypto community is like, you know, where you live, and try and kind of start talking to those people, start, you know, just get yourself involved, get in the room. And then, you know, spend a good amount of time. There's a large amount of literature now on crypto and blockchain, all this stuff. So I would listen to those types of things. And then, you know, there are just tons of educational modules and things like podcasts. You can hear some of one of the great things about crypto is that the rock stars of crypto are still kind of in the space doing things on a daily basis. Like, they're not, you know, retired, rich Warren Buffett type. I mean, not that he's retired, but you know, they're not out there on a day-to-day basis, you know, kind of in the streets doing stuff. So
They've got their sleeves
Right.
rolled up and
Exactly.
they're in the action.
you know, like I get to work with like one of my all-time heroes in Scott Walker, which is, you know, he's kind of one of the crypto OGs. Is just walking around the office.
What's a crypto OG?
So I'd say I think he got into Bitcoin in like 2009. He kind of did the first ICO. He was involved in the first ICO. So him and Brock Pierce go way back, and they're kind of the people I look up to in the space. So
Did they help create this space, basically?
yeah, so they helped kind of bring it into the mainstream, along with a lot of other people, obviously. But
What's funny is that, like, back in 2009, like, that was such a long
yeah,
time
exactly.
ago.
That's the thing is the thing people like don't quite understand is, you know, it's a lot about West right now.
Yeah.
But the way that technology and markets work today is that, you know, we're seeing, you know, things that revolutionize the world very quickly, and the reason that can happen is because of things like the internet, you know, phones, all this stuff.
So whose blogs and podcasts do you recommend if somebody wants to do some research?
Crypto, Twitter, and Reddit, all those things are actually, you know, good resources. Telegram, groups, things like that.
Are there blogs from like Brock or Scott that?
I don't think either of them really blog, but there are a good amount of sites that do the equivalent of a Bloomberg function. So like Cointelegraph, CoinDesk, CoinMarketCap is the best for kind of price and volume and that kind of stuff. And on-chain finance is also really, really good for that. But, you know, I'd say books, you know, podcasts. I mean, really just anything you can get your hands on. just kind of go as deep as possible. And also Medium has great technology posts. Like if you're someone who understands technology or can digest that kind of stuff, a lot of the best kind of valuation stuff is on there for valuation-minded people.
And very generically, though, so my options are either to put money into a fund
Right.
like Potomac when you're ready, right? Potomac Crypto, saying,
Right.
okay, I want you to do all the reading. I don't want to do all
Right.
the reading.
Right.
You do all the reading. I think you're smart. Here's some money,
Yeah.
and I'm going to put money there. Another way would be for me just to go and buy, Bitcoin or buy
Right.
Ethereum or buy Dash or buy, whichever one I feel like is the right coin that I want to buy, or maybe buy a few of them. And at that point, I'm a speculator and trader, I guess, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to buy at this point and then,
So-
have an out.
So the few things I'd say kind of on that idea is, first, people need to remember that crypto markets are highly illiquid, not in the fact that you can't get your money out, because you can obviously, interact with it 24/7. It's great liquidity that way. What I mean is that the price volatility makes it so that, if I need, 90% of my budget to survive on a yearly basis, I shouldn't be gambling 20% of my budget on crypto, because that just it's the risk reward doesn't quite line up. Like I would never invest money in crypto that I need. Like if it's ancillary and you kind of can count it as lost money or invested money and kind of leave it alone for a while. That's kind of the right path. I think, unless you really know what you're doing, you shouldn't try day trading. I mean,
Right.
especially on like BitMEX has like extremely high leverage. I know a lot of people that have lost, a lot of money on BitMEX kind of trading with leverage. So the way to do it would be to, put your money in some sort of, they also have tokenized funds. So like Crypto 20 would be an example of what's basically an index of the top. I mean, it's not quite an ETF or not quite an index, but it's basically an aggregated weighted score of value of the top 50 projects, something like that. And so there's a couple of things you can do like that. But I would say that the main thing is figure out how to do your security and set up a wallet. And don't click on Reddit links and follow YouTube links and all those things. I would say figure out how to get the security stuff kind of ironed out before you get anything. And that's always kind of, even as a running a fund. I mean, we literally don't buy coins that we don't have a good way to hold. And so whether or not that coin's really interesting, if it's only possible to hold on a desktop, like not something I'm interested in, because it's just way too much risk. So I'd say tell people to be, people need to be risk adverse. It's still really early. It's not guaranteed returns.
Right.
And then at the same time, the stuff you want to invest in is the protocol layer, the blockchain based layer. So like things like Ethereum, Bitcoin, EOS, all of those things, Hashgraph, GoChain. Those are all protocol layer projects. And so I'd say a good amount of the coins you see and a good amount of the ICOs are ERC20 tokens, which all rely on the Ethereum network working. So if you want to be risk adverse, bet on protocol layers as opposed to like dApps and
So
stuff.
if you're buying Ethereum, let's say, is that betting on the protocol layer, or is there some other aspect of it that you have to buy, or Bitcoin?
So Ethereum and a lot of these computation networks are what you're essentially buying is access to use their code and their platform to use smart contracts and to build your application on top of the platform. But you're still using the network to send tokens and things like that. And so that can get slow and cumbersome for the Ethereum network. So like if you look at Augur, which is a project that just recently had its mainnet launch, it's a Jeremy Gardner product. It's been really, really big project for a long time. There's a lot of worries that that's going to clog up the Ethereum network. If you look back, CryptoKitties put a lot of strain on the network, and that was a relatively small amount of volume. So we still have to. These things are not fully tested yet. Right. I mean, we want to see where Lightning Network goes. All that stuff is kind of still in play. So it's still very, very early. But again, things progress quickly in the space. So figure out what the news is. Read the news. Read everything you can. Start talking about it. People in the space love to talk about the space. That's what you realize.
Jordan, to say this was fascinating is an understatement. And obviously you have an extraordinarily high amount of passion and brain horsepower. When those things come together, magic happens. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think people should know about this particular subject?
There are a couple of things. First, the normal conversation I have with people about crypto kind of starts off with people asking what I do or something like that, and it kind of leads to this conversation where people they just want to know why, like what's the pitch, why should I get into crypto, And what I always tell them is that, first of all, there's no downside. I mean, whether or not you want to be, financially investing is a different question, but to familiarize yourself with the space and the market, the technology, there's no downside to doing that, right? Like if it turns out to be nothing, there's nothing, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a few lessons to be learned, there's a lot of tech that's been kind of evolving along with the space, connectivity, IoT, all of that stuff kind of has had an increase in funding and because of crypto projects doing ICOs. So what I'd say is the reason why crypto, or the reason why you should get involved in it, is a couple of things. Like first, if it does end up happening, we all have to figure out how to interact with the world using these products, and that's gonna be a hard curve initially. And so to have a leg up and be able to already do that and to kind of see where the future is going ahead of time is a unique opportunity. But also, I think if you look at how human history has evolved, whatever gives you the most functionality is what people will use. As long as there is a sleek interface and people can understand, once something's been invented, if it has a higher functionality, people will eventually gravitate toward it. And I think that's what you're going to see with crypto. I mean, it might spend a couple more years in this kind of gray territory, people saying, is it going to survive? Is it not going to survive? I mean, as of right now, there is no guarantee that the technology is going to work, and I can say with 100% certainty it will survive. And the reason is because there are so many other things people don't see, right? Like the idea that everyone who's graduating, I mean, I literally know like hundreds of kids who are coming up my age, that are involved in blockchain projects, people that are doing ICOs. I mean, the incredible amount of brain drain to the space, like I said earlier, makes it incredibly intriguing to me. I mean, I've been doing kind of entrepreneur finance stuff my whole life, and I've never met people that are as smart and dedicated as people that I met in crypto. And just a year, basically, maybe a year and a half, like really on the scene. So it's just a really, really incredible experience. And I think it's worth your time to check it out. I mean, just something I was looking at last night. There's a bunch of projects that are basically doing a own your own data type play where you have a blockchain identity. Essentially what you do is when you are generating data as a consumer, that is being captured and sold by data brokerage people
Facebook, Google,
to advertisers who are then so really you're looped out of that entirely. There are a bunch of projects that will allow you to harvest your own data, send it to who you want to send it to, get monetarily rewarded for that. Things that make the consumer's life way easier. I mean, that's why people are building these projects, is to help consumers and to help the next generation. But what I'd say is that the seeds of all of the next gen stuff. So IoT, augmented reality, VR, all of this stuff, Internet of Things. So all of these trends, they go seamlessly with the blockchain, and they will. In fact, they work better together. And so a bet on the blockchain space is not a bet on Bitcoin or blockchain. It's a bet on the entire direction of where the fintech market is going. And I mean that on a very fundamental level. And so the impact that it's about to have is almost impossible to put it into words. And so you really just have to read it for yourself, is what I would say.
Well, terrific. This has been extraordinarily stimulating, and I appreciate you spending time sharing. And thank you very much for sharing all this.
Thank you. And I appreciate coming here and getting to talk about this stuff.
Thank you. Jordan's enthusiasm and vision for the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain is now understandable, isn't it? So guys like him make me feel positive about the future of humanity, because there's great minds who are engaging in new things that can be changing the world, and that's exactly what Jordan is doing. So thanks for taking the time to tune into this interview. Next up is my interview with Ali El-Husseini. He is an unusually bright, scholarly type of a man who also understands entrepreneurism and how to create wealth in the world. So Ali operates on a very high level, above where many of us are. He's involved in things, especially around the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain, that are pretty big time. But he also is able to explain these things so people like me who might be neophytes in that particular arena can understand it, can see where the path starts, and can start walking down that path. So it's unusual that we can get people like him to sit and explain things to us in the way that he does. I was really happy that we did. Enjoy this interview. Ali, thanks so much for taking time today. This is the conversation a lot of people have been wondering about. Blockchain, what is it? Cryptocurrency, what does it mean? How should I be thinking about that? It's one of the most, engaging conversations and maybe one of the most confusing conversations. So I'm really excited that you're here to straighten us out.
So, Patrick, first off, thank you so much for having me. My background is I'm Lebanese, so I grew up in Lebanon. And when I was growing up in Lebanon, a gentleman named Patrick Byrne from the U.S. used to come and visit us often in the end of the towards the end of the Civil War, early 90s, and kept interacting with him. Went to school in Germany, then came back to Lebanon, didn't like it. Ended up going to Paris, didn't like it as well. And then Patrick's like, why don't you come go to school in the US and come and work for us at Overstock? I just started this new company, this and that. So I applied a bunch of universities, ended up coming to Utah because I could intern at Overstock and go to school. I ended up coming to University of Utah and started working at the warehouse, making $7 an hour at Overstock, picking packages, and then realizing, this whole e-commerce business, and it was early 2000s, 2004, so everybody was into, the boom and the bust of the e-commerce businesses. And from there, I kept working with Patrick closer and closer, and I worked on projects helping artisans around the world called WorldStock, and then ended up running Overstock's global business as a VP there. And then I left and I worked on a DeSoto project with Hernando DeSoto and Patrick Byrne it's applying blockchain. And then I got involved with previously with a few other projects. As you know, Overstock was the first company to accept Bitcoin.
Right.
And everybody's like, Patrick is crazy. Bitcoin, what's Bitcoin? Who cares about Bitcoin? And it was never about Bitcoin. It was all about that technology called blockchain. Mm-hmm. It's just like how the internet came and everybody's like, oh, who cares about the internet? I have, and then the Palm was everyone using the Palm, and then people were using computers, and then people were using their tablets and then their phones, and the technology keeps changing. And blockchain is here not to go away. It's here to change our world.
So if you're taking somebody who's heard the term blockchain, but doesn't quite understand it, how do you explain blockchain?
Well, it's two words, right? It's block and chain. So basically, you have to think of it as a database. Mm-hmm. Anything you do, you interact. You and I today, we're sitting in this room. If you have money in the bank keeps a ledger for you of your money. Mm-hmm. And that ledger is a private ledger that the bank has. Yet you can go on your computer and I can go on your profile, and Facebook has all your information. Mm-hmm. You signed up for free, so Facebook is selling your information. Right. So we don't trust each other. What do we trust? We trust these institutions that hold these databases on our behalf or hold these keys for us. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they are the intermediaries. What blockchain does, it disrupts everything because it decentralizes the information and it encrypts it. Mm-hmm. So instead of having one server that has all the information, imagine all the information in this world is spread on hundreds and thousands and millions of computers. Mm-hmm. And everybody has a key, an encrypted key that holds that information. Mm-hmm. And you have your private key and you have basically a password, protected password specifically for you. And you have all your information. And if you get hacked, then all your information is still there and no one can take it away. Mm-hmm. And so it's a bunch of computers that you can call blocks. Mm-hmm. And the chain is the information that is stored. And once you and I transact, it's chronological and it builds on each other. Mm-hmm. So it's one block attached to another block. So it's a chain of blocks. And that information is stored and it has a date stamp, it's verified, and it's immutable. So you can't change it. Mm-hmm. And once you can't change something, then why do we need the system? So you and I want to buy your house today. Mm-hmm. You have money in the bank, and instead of going to a real estate agent, we can have a contractual agreement on the blockchain that exercises once we say that you have a digital signature, the money goes, and then the title comes to me if everything is on the blockchain. And
then everybody else that's in that blockchain knows about it too.
Yes. Let's say Bitcoin or any other blockchain out there. Mm-hmm. The information is, everybody has the information. It could be a private blockchain, it could be a public blockchain. If it's public, everyone has the information. So you can't hide anything. You know, if we talk about the systems inefficiencies, all the inefficiencies fly out the door with blockchain. And people say, oh, well, it's too early, this and that. But imagine that our life gets so simplified that we don't depend on anything. We don't need to pay commission to anybody. We don't realize how much there's all this derivative cost layered into everything, into this can, into recycling it, into everything.
So basically it takes out middlemen because it's decentralized.
Absolutely.
And then everybody's just kind of communicating that's in the blockchain. So there's two things really. There's cryptocurrency, which utilizes the vehicle of a blockchain, but blockchain technology in and of itself has many other applications outside of cryptocurrency.
So see, this is where the confusion comes, Patrick. People look at blockchain and they say, oh, it's just blockchain is one thing, crypto is another thing. So you need a vehicle, right? If you want to get something going, you need people to. We talked about how the information flows.
Right.
So in order for us to make sure that information goes everywhere, we need to have some miners.
Right.
Those miners, that blockchain has a currency. That currency pays people out.
Right.
Either by mining it or by making sure that information is correct and no one's playing with this information. And in this case, the vehicle here is the crypto. So the crypto is valuable. People think, oh, cryptocurrency is going to the roof. This and that, but don't think of it as a cryptocurrency. At the end of the day, if you want to use that blockchain and you think that blockchain has value, you need to have that cryptocurrency, otherwise it dies.
So the cryptocurrency is just the means of exchanging the value of the blockchain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so now, what is your, like, if you're looking down the road and seeing how things are going, how do you think, I mean, you started to explain it, but do you think it's going to be a radical impact on our world, the whole blockchain phenomenon?
Absolutely. In every period of our lifetime, specifically now, the last 60, 70 years, the world is developing so quickly. Technology is changing the world. It's all about innovation. Like 15 years ago, could you have said that Facebook has any value?
Right. No.
Why is Facebook valuable today?
Because of the engagement.
Engagement and the information.
Right.
The world, you know, CNN the other day came up with some analysis. The wealth of information that is spreading, that free information you think you're signing up to, is about $300 billion.
Wow.
And that's information that you're giving away for free. And blockchain is here for you to decide who you give that information to. And the world is trending into a way where this intermediating all the inefficiencies in the system. If you want an efficient system, blockchain gets you there. Can you implement it as fast as you can? No, it needs adoption.
Right.
We need adoption. So I see it as any other technology. It's going to take 10 to 15 years for everybody to adopt it. But while you're doing this, look at every other investor or every other businessman who became a millionaire or billionaire in our world. And let's talk specifically about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, why is he so successful? And everyone thinks, oh, he has some magic potion. What he does is he looks at value in a company. If you think there's value in blockchain, and if you understand it well, and today we're talking about it, then think of it as a stock or as any portfolio of anything. Would you invest in it today if you know that in 20 or 30 years it will be worth billions? Just like if you put $1 or $1,000 in Berkshire Hathaway in 1975, it will be worth 88 million or something today. Think of it this way. If you think that the system is going to change the world, if you believe in the vehicle that is driving it, which is those cryptocurrencies, and you think there's value there, definitely you should invest in it, and it's going to disrupt the world.
And time horizon, like for people who are looking at investing, I guess right now the best way to invest, as you're saying, is by buying some cryptocurrency. And how would you what are the considerations? Like there's so many of them. They obviously all aren't going to make it. So how do you decide which ones?
Well, it's a very interesting question because any advice you give anybody today would be worth everything or nothing tomorrow.
Right.
Because the market right now is not regulated, so
Right.
it fluctuates too much. And then anybody can dump a few billion in, few billion out, and then make you lose all your profits.
They're
tomorrow.
manipulating the market.
And they're manipulating it. So what you should think of it as a passive investment where you sleep on it for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
Put your money in there, and the way you look at it is you look at the application of that blockchain. If you look at it, specific blockchains, there are many different ways of what the blockchain is doing. You have things that you could have assets, manage assets. So if you think that one day all the assets will be built on a certain blockchain, you could look at that. There are things that are useful for exchange. There are things that are vehicles for like the ERC20 of Ethereum or EOS or any of those other currencies, blockchains that you could use to do all the ICOs and all these other things. So those are a vehicle that you could put your money in. But the way you should look at it is, if you were Warren Buffett and the market closed tomorrow, New York Stock Exchange closed tomorrow and NASDAQ and everybody shut down, would you own that thing for the next 10 years? If you think that the people behind it and the technology is there, and in 10 years that technology is going to be disrupting the world, then you would invest in it.
Based on my business background, I have a lot of interest in healthcare. And I'm seeing for electronic health records, for example, blockchain can completely transform that. And there's companies that are emerging now. So, those are kind of bets I would likely place, because of just, I kind of know that area. I see blockchain. I have a sense of how that might impact this area. And the efficiencies, as you said, are spectacular and can have massive impact. Now, aren't there a lot of patents being issued around blockchain right now, and who's getting them?
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy because everybody who's telling you stay away of cryptocurrency and don't touch it are the people that are heavily investing in it and getting the most patents. And these are the JP Morgans, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Walmart, a retailer, a grocery store, e-commerce site. It has just got awarded 15 patents for the blockchain that have the usability of blockchain that have nothing to do with, zero to do with retail. One of them has to do with healthcare and how storing information on healthcare, private data. And then few other ones have to do with logistics and a bunch of other things. And all these big banks are putting heavy investments into getting these patents, because they know that the day is going to come where these patents are going to be as expensive as any FDA-approved drug today that is heavily used. Imagine that you have a patent that no one can use except you.
So there's a volume of patents being issued right now, and it seems like the biggest, the multi-billion-dollar companies are all gobbling them up as quick as they can. So they know something.
Oh, they definitely know something. They know that this is coming to change the world, and they're heavily investing in it, and they don't want you touching it because they want to be the first ones using it. So what this system does, this system tells all these banks and everyone else, I don't need you anymore. I don't need my real estate agent. I don't need my look at title companies in America. There are about 5 to 10 of them. Their market cap is over $5 billion. They have 5 to 10 billion market cap. And what do title companies do? They just guarantee the chain of title. Right. And what's the most basic thing that blockchain can do for you? Is tell you that Patrick sold this property to Ali and no one can change that. That's the record. It's immutable. It's there to stay. Why do we need to pay thousands of dollars for title companies to issue, when we sell the house, that title? And not because we want to do it, because the bank would not let us get a loan if we don't use a title company. Right. So they're all in on it, and they all want us to keep paying and paying for things we don't need.
And isn't that it's going to solve a problem in other parts of the world, especially relative to land title? Because there's a lot of people who really own property and they've lived there maybe for generations, but they really don't have a title, or if they try to get a title, very inefficient to get it from their government. It could be months, years trying to get it. So this suddenly will take all of those people in less regulated or more impoverished areas, if you will, who are landowners, and give them the ability to now have efficiency in trading their property.
7 billion people, 5 billion out of 7 don't have ownership of the property they reside in. Okay, and as you know, out of that 5 billion, it's almost impossible, or in certain cases it takes 20 to 30 years to get ownership of the land you're in. Look at the Arab Spring that took place and started in Tunisia, if you remember.
Yes.
And for the first time, a guy who, his name is Bouazizi, he self-immolated, he burnt himself. He had a fruit cart, fruit cart.
Yes.
And then the police confiscated his fruit cart, so he burnt himself down. So if you look at the 70 plus people that self-immolated in the Arab Spring throughout the Arab world, they all have one common denominator. It's one thing and one thing only they cared about is capital.
Right.
And all of these guys that did this did not have a title to their homes. And not having a title to your home where you live and reside is your main source of capital. It should be your most valuable asset, right? If in a lifetime, the person's most valuable asset is their home. Imagine you can get a title and unleash all that dead capital around the world that no one is using because you can't get a title. And Bouazizi could not get a title for his home to get a $2,000 loan so he can get an actual truck to transport his fruit instead of pushing it on the cart, because he could not afford the paperwork to get the title, the paperwork is more expensive than his house.
Wow. And with blockchain, that would go to zero.
And with blockchain, it goes to zero. Transactions go to zero. When you go to a grocery store today, you pay, the grocery store company pays anywhere between 1.5% to 3%, depending if it's an American Express or Visa, that goes to under 1 basis point.
Right.
When it comes to anything, it disrupts. But most importantly, you hit it right on the nail. 5 billion people, give those people title. It would unleash so much capital.
Wow.
It will bring equality back to this world. It will lift people out of poverty and change this world once and for all.
Yeah, and that to me is extremely exciting to see how much wealth creation there can be just because of a technology and what it can do for people. And we talked a bit earlier about your travel schedule. You seem to be running around the world kind of working on blockchain deals. So one, which I think you said you're going to be in Africa next week or so. What are you doing there, and what is blockchain going to do there?
So I'm doing exactly what you asked me earlier. Is we're working on different pilots in Africa to title these properties. I'm going to East and West Africa. A lot of countries do not have official registry for property, and the properties are held with tribes or with different. In different villages, or there are no record whatsoever. So the record fluctuates from no record all the way to state record, and most of it is in between, in the limbo, where there is either it's a tribal record and no one knows whose property is this. It's a community land. It's a community titling system. So what we want to do is we want to go in and then try to implement a new property registrar system. Give these people actual titles, and then get different governments to really relook at their titling system, their registrar of property, and eliminate corruption. As you know, Africa is one of the most corrupt continents in the world. And if blockchain is the simplest application of blockchain is eliminating corruption, because you can't play with the records.
Right.
Once it's written, it's written. So what I'm going to do is I'm going and meeting with different governments and different banks around the world and try to get them to implement these reforms and get them to do it the right way. If you have a strong foundation, the foundation of governments is the Constitution and is giving people their rights. And the property right is the most important part of this.
Yes. So, and now if you can start to imagine, governments are going to be losing some control, and so hopefully, so dictators may not take well to this, but in general, saying we can unleash a force of value creation in the citizens, throughout Africa and other regions of the world, that would be unprecedented. Suddenly these people can come online, because if you're dealing with a government currency that's very fickle, it's fiat currency. It's tied to the whims of whoever's in control, and they may be incompetent, or they may be malevolent, or both. That suddenly somebody could work for 10 years and the money they have is worthless. But now if they have property that's secured through a blockchain and maybe even have a new form of currency that the government can't mess with.
So in an ideal world, if you would tell me what would be your ideal world, I would say Africa is the motherland, right? Africa has all the resources. Yeah. Most African states are below poverty line. You know, their population is below poverty line. And a lot of them depend on raw material, right? And then depending on the commodity prices that land or that country has, the currency fluctuates. So you see extreme cases of hyperinflation, just like what's happening in Venezuela today. Venezuela is a great example. What you want to do in an ideal world is take their fiat, make it digital,
right,
and then peg it to actual property that you issue on the blockchain,
right,
that backs that digital new currency or the existing fiat today even. And then in a way, you say that this asset, this actual real asset, is backing the currency, and then you get the government to have a stable economy, you get the people there to be able to trade and then have value and be able to get microloans, get actual loans, build businesses. You know, the data shows, if you look up the data, people that own their home and have a title to their home are more likely to leave the home because they're scared that someone's going to come and take it. And it's the case, Peru has done this, and then the record shows it. You know, people are more likely to work harder, get their home to be in a much better shape, have more investments, and then try to get loans to build their life and have a better life.
Yeah, so it gets to be kind of thrilling about what could emerge out of all this. And I was wondering in the beginning, when cryptocurrency started coming into play, I was saying, how would the government allow this? I mean, in other words, the currency that the government controls in the United States through the Federal Reserve, et cetera, to say that suddenly there's a parallel universe of currency that people could start trading with each other and just bypass the whole, the dollar, if you will.
But fiat. If you think of fiat, what's fiat? What's backing fiat? Nothing. Look at the U.S. dollar. How much money is in circulation?
Right.
There are trillions upon trillions of dollars that are bogus money that we have never seen before. With crypto, it's limited. You know that there is a finite amount of crypto.
Right.
You know, when you ask me about investment, would you put your money in something that you know there's X amount of it, no matter what, it's not going to change,
right,
and no one can take it from you? And tomorrow, you know that it's going to be there and you can put it in your pocket. I can put $1 billion in my pocket and walk out this door.
Yeah.
And I know that it's secure, no one can take it, and it's not there for the government to tell me, give me back your
And I personally love it because, I'm very libertarian in my orientation, but I'm wondering how the government isn't panicking. I'm saying, the people in the government would look and say, oh my God, I'm the head of the Treasury. This is something that's a little disturbing to me.
So if you look at the reaction of the government, and specifically around the world, the U.S. government initially was very anti-crypto, anti-blockchain. And then they started saying, oh, well, we're going to treat it now. They kept changing how they treat crypto. Now today you have the SEC has a tsar. All these the Treasury is appointing someone as well. Every different organization of the government is appointing a go-to person that is a blockchain expert, because they know that sooner or later the government needs to adapt this technology.
Yeah.
But imagine how much money we save in the government's budget. We talk about deficit in the U.S. government. How much money you could save by implementing these blockchain innovations, and then how much money you could save on the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
So if the government should be adopting it instead of saying this is not a good thing and this is crazy.
Yeah, I believe that, but the government's not always smart, especially when it comes to...
That's why we need people like you and me
Yeah.
to say we need to change the system, because that's how it happens. It's a bottom-up approach. It's not a top-down approach. It's a bottom-up approach. People have to adopt it, and eventually it will change the world. Look at Uber.
Yeah.
Who would have said Uber will get that much adoption? But what Uber did is Uber was not functioning anywhere in the world initially, starting from the top down.
Right.
People started using it, and then the government changed their regulations and laws to allow it.
They had to at that point.
And then it broke all these different unions of taxis, and then they were controlling the market.
So what are you right now most excited about, as far as you're working in this world and doing doing the traveling, et cetera, that you're doing? What excites you most?
What excites me most is that what we're doing here is gonna, one, change the world. Two, it's gonna make everybody better off. It's gonna make the people better off, not the big guys, but the little people, the you and me, the people on the street. These are the people that will benefit the most. Right. And I look at this and I say, anybody with a sane mind should go and put all his money in crypto and blockchain, and just think of it as this is your vehicle for you to have a much better life and much better ending.
So supposing, okay, I'm in, right? I'm now going to put a bunch of money into it. How do you decide for if you're going to buy crypto? How do you decide which one to buy?
Well, I look at it two ways.
Good.
One, if you know the different cryptocurrencies out there, and there's about 800 of them plus, then I would say read a lot of their white papers, a lot of what they're out there to do, what they're trying to accomplish, and then decide if you don't understand that language, then, so this is one venue. If you understand the language, you understand what they do and their applications, I'd invest in them for the long term. I invest in companies like Monero, I invest in companies like EOS, I'll put my money in Bitcoin because a lot of these different currencies are coming out of Bitcoin. They're a fork of Bitcoin. I'd put some money in Ethereum. If I understand those different vehicles, I would put money in that.
So you'd place multiple bets.
Multiple bets, but not big bets, just small enough bets because it's gonna pay off one day, and just enough money that I trickle a few dollars every day, even in things like we developed internally, like Ravencoin, that I think is the future. But
you say you're talking.
I'm talking about
Overstock?
Overstock.com.
And is that coin launched now?
Yeah, there's a publicly traded coin that Overstock backed, Medici Ventures worked on, and it's a fork of Bitcoin, and it has a.
What does that mean, a fork of Bitcoin?
What it means is you take a certain crypto and then you make these different edits on it. So basically, think of it as a car. When you take your car and then you go and you decide to change. You want to change the engine in it, you want to change the interior, you do all these changes, and now you think it's much faster, you do all these, just a Formula One car that you make it specialized to you, and then you end up getting a lot more out of it, and it becomes its own thing because people now are mining it, people now are looking at it in a different way. So the technology everything goes off of certain technologies, like the ERC20, which is off of, that protocol is based on Ethereum. So you look at these different vehicles and you say, which one should I pick?
Right.
And then I wouldn't pick one. I would pick 5 different ones or 10 different ones that cover all the different things, applications you talk about. Something to do with healthcare, something to do with payments. Imagine how much money you save. Something to do with banking. So I look at it, and the company Medici Ventures and Overstock and Patrick Byrne looks at it in this way. What are the world applications of Bitcoin and blockchain? We look at, blockchain meets capital markets. Blockchain meets specifically central banking. Blockchain meets healthcare. Blockchain meets voting, just voting.
Right.
Imagine how much you'd have cleaner elections in corrupt countries when you cannot play with the votes, when it's blockchain based.
Right.
The world, like this past election where people say, Hillary won the popular vote, Trump won, the electoral college. If you look at it this way, if it's blockchain based, or the identities, he's cheating, he's using multiple identities. So I would look at it this way. The other way of looking at it is the companies. I wouldn't tell you to invest with us, but I would say look at the companies, the portfolio companies that are now getting all these patents, all these different banks, companies out there that are investing in crypto heavily. Are they worthwhile your time? If the market closed for 10 years, would you put your money with them?
Right.
If you think of it that way and not worry the next day, if you're day trading, it's one thing. If you're long-term investing, it's a different thing.
So I know that Overstock is, and I guess Medici is kind of the arm that manages this. You guys are up to some pretty exciting things, and there's just a large investment came in, I think, from China into.
Yeah, we have a commitment coming from a company called GSR, venture capitalist group out of Hong Kong that is bought about 168 million of tokens of our T0, which people thought it was an ICO, but it's not. It was a security token. So what we did here is we created a company called T0, which is blockchain meets capital markets.
Okay.
And we realized in today's stock world, you can't. There's all these inefficiencies in trading. They make so much money from trading. One. Two, they make a lot of money by borrowing your own stock. When you're sleeping tonight, someone is borrowing your stock and paying a premium to the bank. So we realized we could save everybody a lot of money and get you to make a lot more money, and then the moms and pops of this world by eliminating all these inefficiencies.
So in that example, do I get to be my own bank in essence? If somebody wants to borrow my stock, I'm getting paid as compared to the bank?
But like for example, let's say today, you have a stock, right? So somebody has custody of your stock. It's held. The DTCC and all these guys. So you go to your bank, and in reality, your stock is held. It's an IOU of IOUs of IOUs. But what happens at night? Your bank does an overnight lending. Someone comes in and say, I want to borrow 10 shares of Google Alpha, and then he borrows the shares and he pays a fee. But that fee doesn't end up going to you. It goes to the bank and the bank's partners and the bank's other partners, and then you get a sliver of a fee. And imagine all these mutual funds and all these retirement funds and all these different 401k plans that are out there that should be getting a lot more money, but they're not. And then this way, what GSR is doing is buying a bunch of our tokens, because what we want to do is we want to definitely disrupt that whole system.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a part of this project is looking at 401ks and kind of how I think a lot of people are deluded about the virtue of them and all the fees that come out of them, et cetera, similar things. So it really changes even for workers, how they might get pensions or how they might get retirement savings, et cetera, and they end up with a lot more money at the end of the day if it's using this technology as compared to the current methodologies.
Absolutely, and the more I look at it, the more people should be free to invest however they want. It's your money,
right?
And then your company limits you all the time on a few funds that you understand nothing about,
right?
And then at the end of the day, it's your money, and you're going to be the one retiring at the end of the day and not being able to spend it, while every year you get charged 10, 100 basis points depending on your account. And then in this way, what Overstock did is Overstock Retail created an arm called Medici Ventures. And Medici is all the blockchain efforts we have. So we've invested in companies that do voting, like Votes. We invested in a company, the first digital fiat in the world, called Bit down in Barbados. And we're working on a payment system, just a payment network, a digital currency and all of that. We invested in companies that do logistics. And then we did the T0, which is, capital markets. And we have a few more that we've done, but we're looking at disrupting that whole system. Just look at Western Union. Every time, you don't think of it, but the US is the second largest market for remittance in the world. It goes off between first and second. And then imagine all these people sending money to their loved ones, and they have to pay. When you're sending $100, you're paying 10% of that money, while you can only pay a few cents. Why would you want to do that? It just makes no sense.
Yeah. So what does it feel like to be you, to say, hey, I'm working in this world? Like, I actually don't get to just read about it on blogs or see, reports on it. I actually get up every day and I'm doing something in the world that's helping to bring this into reality. So what does that feel like to you?
Well, it's a crazy feeling, because, I started working. I started at the bottom and I went my way up, and I had friends that worked for Yahoo. They were the early employees of Yahoo, and they left Yahoo early on, and they went and they started like a company called WhatsApp. WhatsApp.
Oh, that little company.
That little company, WhatsApp. It was a little company, and at that time the value of it was like 50 million. I said, "Can I work with you guys? Can I invest with you?" And they're like, "No. You don't bring anything to the table." And I realized right there and then that I need to bring something to the table. Otherwise, nobody would want me to work with them. There's no free lunch.
Right.
So I realized then, it hit me in the head. It was, what do I bring to the table? And I started looking into Bitcoin at that time and all these other things. And with Overstock, I started realizing what can I bring to the table. Mind you, WhatsApp was bought because all the information it has and all these different records it has of me and you and all these contacts that
Right.
you have for 14, I think 20 billion was the total deal value.
Wow.
And then from there on, and that's many years post that conversation that we had over brunch with a bunch of friends of mine of getting into it. And unfortunately, I couldn't get into it. But what I realized is this is coming to stay. And the people that told me about WhatsApp told me, said, don't invest in WhatsApp. You can't get in as investment with us because you're not bringing anything to the table. But you should look into Bitcoin and blockchain. I was like, what are these guys talking about? Then we looked into it, and then my boss, Patrick Byrne, people thought he was crazy because he kept telling people, it's blockchain, it's going to change the world. Would you have invested in the internet if you knew that, or companies that have services for the internet, if you knew the internet was going to change the world in the 90s?
Of course.
Okay. Think of it today. If you know that blockchain is going to change the world and it's going to be the next big thing, don't you want to invest in the vehicles that bring you all these services and all these different aspects of the blockchain to you and to your door?
Yeah, of course. It is exciting. It's I'm how can I put it, in a positive way, envious. That they say what a great place to be in a career and go around the world and do the stuff and change things. So it's I congratulate you for playing that role in life every single day. And I know you just got off a plane to come get here real quick to talk to us. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and for sharing with the people who are viewing the deeper understanding of what this really means and what it means to the world and to the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I think this is here to stay, and you and I in 5 or 10 years, we're going to talk about it and we're going to laugh how we did not do enough.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, now you got some insights into the deeper world of cryptocurrency and blockchain, and maybe now you can understand why people are talking about this, what all the buzz is about. Blockchain's changing the world, and it's going to continue to change the world in significant ways, and this is why we're having these interviews like the one I did with Ali that can absolutely impact your life and your understanding. You need to understand what the future looks like relative to these technologies. So thanks for tuning in. Imagine you have an Ivy League education, you're soaring in one of the top investment banks in the world as far as your career, you're moved around the world because of your abilities in this realm, your future seems bright, and one day you decide to quit and become an entrepreneur. That's Ryan Levesque. His story is really amazing. He's obviously a very bright individual, but the way that he figured out how to navigate the world of entrepreneurism and turning it into wealth, development, and abundance is something that you're going to learn a lot from. So dial into this interview with me and Ryan Levesque. Ryan, thanks so much for being here. It's good to be here with you today. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So we have a company where we teach entrepreneurs how to launch and grow their business. And it's based on my own personal experience launching businesses in 23 different markets. So we have a best-selling book that's called Ask, a book that's called Choose that helps you identify what market you should go into and how to start the right business for you.
Perfect. So tell me, were you born an entrepreneur or how'd you come to this?
I definitely was not born an entrepreneur. In fact, I tell people I'm one of the most risk-averse entrepreneurs that you're ever going to meet. After college, I grew up, my dad worked for the government. He worked nights, he was a shipping clerk. My mom was cutting hair in the basement of our house, so I grew up very blue collar. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was fortunate enough to get into an Ivy League school and I studied neuroscience. So my parents thought I was going to go on to become a doctor, which is like the safest path that you could follow. I decided to go into finance instead. After college, I worked on Wall Street for the investment bank Goldman Sachs, and then I eventually made my way to China. And I started working for the financial services company AIG. And I was opening up offices for AIG across China. And I was living out of hotels. I was on an airplane every single week, and I was burnt out. I was in my mid-20s, and I had what I call a quarter-life crisis. I said, there has to be a better way. My wife and I were married, but we had this bi-country marriage. She was in grad school in Hong Kong. I was based out of Shanghai. We'd see each other once or twice a month. And I said, I want to do something different. And it led me to this path of building a business so I could live life on my own terms. I told people, I said, listen, I don't want to live my life in a box, traveling in a box, to work in a box. I want to be able to build something that gives me freedom, gives the ability to make an impact, and someday leave a legacy.
So I'm assuming it was smooth sailing once you made that decision, right?
The first business that we launched ended up being a complete failure. And it's one of the lessons I teach entrepreneurs that I work with. And it's the importance of not going into a fad market. So the first business that we started was in the tiny, obscure market of teaching people how to make Scrabble tile jewelry. So my wife, at the time, this is 2007, 2008, stumbled upon a website which was brand new at the time, a website called Etsy.com. If you're not familiar, it's a site that's like eBay for handmade goods. And at the time, it was a brand new site. And she stumbled on this jewelry that was selling like crazy that involved using Scrabble tiles and origami paper. And she said, hey, honey, we can do this. We're in China. There's all the origami paper that you could want in the world. We have access to inexpensive labor. Let's manufacture this jewelry and let's import it into the United States. And I said, honey, I don't want to do that. That's going to tie us to a factory in southern China. We want a location-independent business. We want to be able to travel and live life on our own terms. So she said, okay, put it to bed. A few weeks later, she reaches out to me again and she says, look, remember that Scrabble tile jewelry thing? I said, I thought we closed the door on that thing. She says, no, time out. There's this woman. She's not selling the jewelry. She's teaching people how to make the jewelry. And the cool thing about Etsy is that you can look at a person's sales history. So you can see how many sales someone's making every single day. And we did the math, and she was selling this tutorial for $25, and she was making 20 to 30 sales a day. We did the math. We said, that's like $15,000 a month, and it's all profit. She's just selling this PDF. Like, we can do this. And so we bought her product. It wasn't terribly good. We said, we can build a better mousetrap. We built our own tutorial. My wife learned how to make the jewelry. We took photographs. We did the text. We started selling it. First month, we made $1,000, $2,000, $4,000, $5,000, $9,000 a month. We said, we're going to be rich. Like, this is great. This is going to do great. And it wasn't that much longer after that the worldwide Scrabble tile jewelry market crashed. It turns out the whole thing was just a fad. People stopped buying the jewelry, so everyone selling the jewelry wasn't making any money. People stopped buying tutorials on how to make the jewelry, and before we knew it, we were basically broke. I'd quit my job. My wife was in grad school. We're living in a 400 square foot apartment. We had that moment where we looked at each other and we said, now what? What do we do now? And we decided to move back to the States and start over. Mid-20s, late 20s at this point. We had 2 suitcases. We moved to Brownsville, Texas, the poorest zip code in the country, about a mile away from the Mexican border, which is where my wife grew up, where she was from, so we wanted to be close to her parents. And we started over. We started our first real business that did go on to become successful. So I know what it's like having those ramen noodle and bologna sandwich days. I know what it's like on a $50 a week food budget. I know what it's like having bars on the windows and a mattress on the floor. I know what those days are like. And I find that's one of the things that holds people back from going after it. People want to know, do you have to give up good in order to go for great?
So it's obvious after hearing that story why you would write a book called Choose, but we'll get to that in a second. From the time I've known you and heard you speak, a part of your depth comes from a significant health challenge that I think also colors your perspective. Tell us about that, because I want the people who hear you to understand, like I do, that this is a deep well that we're dipping into, not a shallow well.
So after we launched that Scrabble tile jewelry business and it was a failure, we moved back to the States and I launched my first real business that became successful, which was in a random obscure market, teaching people how to care for their orchids, as in the flower. And we took that business from nothing to $25,000 a month in 18 months. My wife quit the job that she was working at the time. We go all in, take that business to $500,000 a year. But I thought it was a fluke. Like, I thought it was just I was so scared that the same thing was going to happen again. So I decided to diversify into another market. To make my parents happy that I was actually using my education from college, we went into the how to improve your memory market. So we started teaching people memory techniques. So we went into that business, took that to $500,000 a year. Well, before I know it, I was going into market after market. I went to 23 different markets, which is crazy. And at that time, my first son was born. And right now, you see me on camera right now, I'm about 185 pounds, 190 pounds, in pretty good shape. But after my son was born, I started mysteriously losing weight. Again, I'm running these 23 different businesses. I'm a new dad. I'm losing all this weight, and I'm tired all the time. At the time, I just chalked it up to being a new dad and trying to run a fast-growing company. But my wife insisted that I apply for life insurance. She said, "You're responsible for someone else's life now. Apply for life insurance." So I did. Apply for life insurance, and I go away on a trip, come back, and there's a letter waiting for me on my desk, and it's from the life insurance company. I open up the letter, and the letter says, "Denied." I just turned 30 years old. Denied life insurance. Now, if you're denied life insurance, typically it means something serious is going on. So I call up the life insurance agent, and if you apply for life insurance, you know that they do a medical exam. I didn't have the results of that exam, but the agent did. So I talked to him, and he said, "I'm not a doctor, but I think you want to sit down." He proceeded to give me the numbers from my lab results, and I wrote them down. And then I tell people I made the biggest mistake of my life. I went to Google. I went to Google to find out what they meant. And I typed in my numbers into Google, and they came back: kidney failure, renal system shutdown, and pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is like a death sentence. And so I'm freaking out. And I remember that night my wife asked me, she said, "I saw we got the life insurance letter. Is everything okay?" And I said, "Well, not exactly. We need to talk." So she starts breaking down and schedules a doctor's appointment the very next morning. Now at this point, I was in denial. I thought that they had messed up my results with somebody else. I thought somehow the results got swapped. So we go to the doctor the next day, and they draw blood. They do some lab results. They say, "We're going to order this stat. Hang tight in the waiting room. We'll order this right now." And I remember when the doctor came back out in the waiting room, he comes to me, grabs me by the shoulders, and he says, "Mr. Levesque, you should be in a coma right now. We're taking you to the emergency room." So they rush me to the ER, spend 10 days in ICU, in intensive care. I've got a 6-month-old baby at home. I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to die. And it turns out I was an undiagnosed juvenile diabetic. I had type 1 diabetes, and I was one of these guys in my 20s. I never went to go see a doctor. I lived in China for 5 years. I never saw a doctor when I was living in China. So I'd just gone undiagnosed all these years, and my body had reached a point where it was shutting down. And so I emerged from that experience, and I said, if I want to do something with my life, right? If I want to do something with my life, now's the time to do it. And I'd had this financial success in all these different markets, and I'd worked hard to get there. But what I realized is that I wasn't impacting a large number of people. I had something here that had worked for me. It had transformed my family's life. Listen, I grew up blue collar. I grew up, my parents didn't go to college. I grew up as working class as it comes. And I've been able to build this great life for myself, and I want to share that with people who wanted to do the same thing for their family and make a difference in the world. And so that's why I published my first book, Ask. And I revealed what I consider to be my secret family recipe, which is how I had success in all of these 23 different markets. And that's the path that started the company that we built, and we've got 60 employees, and hundreds of thousands of people have read our books, and millions of people around the world have now followed this process that we now teach entrepreneurs on how to have success in your business.
So let's stay on your book, Ask. The people who are taking your courses, what do they learn?
So whenever I bring up this topic of ask, people say, well, is it as simple as just ask people what they want and give it to them? And the answer is not exactly. See, the process of asking questions is a bit counterintuitive. You can't just ask someone, what should I sell? How much should I charge it for? And then deliver it, because people don't know what they want. In fact, you've probably heard the quote from Henry Ford. He's famous for saying, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. Steve Jobs is famous for saying, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And the reason why those statements ring true is because they are true. People don't know what they want, but they do know a few things. They do know, for example, what they don't want. In fact, if I were to ask you, what's your dream car? What do you want in your dream car? You're going to access a part of your brain that's speculating. You're going to guess. But if I were to ask you, think about the car you're driving right now. What's one thing about your car right now that kind of bugs you a little bit, that's annoying, that frustrates you? Most of us can pick out what that thing is. And it gives us a clue on the types of questions that you want to ask to understand your market, to understand your audience at a deep emotional level. And the ask method is all about the nuance of asking the right questions in the right way to the right people to understand your audience and who they are. So you can not only better sell, but more importantly, better serve. And that's what the ask method is all about.
I remember when that book came out, I probably had a dozen friends recommend it to me. It was a really useful book for entrepreneurs, but now you have written what appears to be a prequel to that book. So what's a new book and why was that needed?
So when you write a book like Ask, one of the great things that happens is you get a bunch of letters, emails, messages from people who tell you how much the book has changed their life. But you also get messages from people who say, I read the book and it didn't work. I tried what you teach and it didn't work for me. And when I got letters like that, it frustrated me. It pained me because I put my blood, sweat, and tears, my heart and soul into that book. And as many entrepreneurs as this worked for, there were people that used the methodology and didn't have success. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of that. And it kicked off what became the biggest research project of my life. And I started looking at what were the reasons why people were failing? What mistakes were they making? Where did I go wrong? Did I leave something out? And what I found is it all came down to one thing. People were choosing bad markets. And there's a metaphor that I use in my teaching, and it's like this. You know, when you start a business, it's like deciding to throw your raft in a river. Now, you're building your business because you want to take yourself to some destination, whether it's achieving financial freedom, making an impact, leaving a legacy, changing your life and the life of your customers. And so that river is the thing that's going to get you to that destination. Now, you can have the best boat money can buy. You can hire the best crew. You can buy the best equipment. You can row 18 hours a day. But if that boat is facing the wrong direction, or worse yet, you throw that boat into a river that doesn't have any water in it, or a river that's going to swallow you up whole because it's just too big, you're never going to get to your destination. And that's what I found, is that people were choosing bad rivers. And so I asked myself, I said, what if I could teach people how to find that hidden river? The river that was just right. The river that's going to take you to exactly where you want to go. And so I embarked on this research project, and I looked at each of the 23 markets that we went into. I studied every single one of my clients and students and looked at what were the factors that separated the businesses and markets that were successful compared to the ones that failed. Now, I'm a huge fan. I was inspired by the work of Jim Collins, who's written Built to Last, Good to Great, Great by Choice. Now, Jim Collins' work centers around studying the most iconic companies in the world and what separates those that have been successful for decades from those that failed along the way. And I wanted to do the same thing for our small niche businesses. What was it that separated them? And what we found was that there were 7 factors. 7 factors that when you get these things right, you're setting yourself up for success. Every single one of our most successful businesses checked off these 7 boxes. The ones that failed were missing one of these key ingredients. And that is the subject of this book, Choose.
Okay, so obviously I have to know, what are the 7 factors?
So when it comes to choosing the right market and starting the right business, there are 7 factors. And I'll talk about a few of them right now. So one of the things that we discovered is that every single one of the most successful markets have what we call the 5 market must-haves. These are 5 factors that if you want to be successful, you want to make sure your market has. And I'll go through them. The first is what we call an evergreen market. Now, an evergreen market is in contrast with a fad market. Evergreen market is a market that was relevant 10 years ago, and it's a market that'll be relevant 10 years from now. Recent examples of fad markets, in my experience, I share the story of my Scrabble tile jewelry business. That's how I learned that lesson the first time. But a lot of people have experienced this recently. So fidget spinners is a perfect example of a fad market. It took over the world and then disappeared off a cliff. Another one that a lot of people have been affected by is the Bitcoin market. Now, there was a time recently where you could not turn a corner without everybody talking about Bitcoin and building businesses around Bitcoin, membership sites and online programs and exchanges. And you saw the price of Bitcoin skyrocket and then fall off a cliff. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can use a tool called Google Trends. Now, Google Trends is a tool that Google puts out to analyze the keyword volume of keywords. So how many people are online searching for information on Bitcoin or fidget spinners? And you can see the global trends. Is it going up? Is it cyclical? Is it going down? Or is it stable? Now, I learned the hard way what happens when you go into a fad market. They go up, but then they fall off a cliff. And so some of the markets that are evergreen markets, markets that have been here they're here to stay, are markets like orchid care, markets like leadership skills. You're looking for things that are going to be relevant, that are going to fuel your soul and fill your bank account for years and years and years to come. Not something that's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. So that's the first thing. But being in an evergreen market, turns out, is not enough. You also want a market that is an enthusiast market. Now, what that means is, in contrast with a problem-solution market, you want a market where people are consumers in that same space for years and years. So an example of a problem-solution market would be something like the flood removal market. Like if you have a flooded basement, you call up a company, they help you get rid of that flooding damage, and then you move on. There are no clubs, there are no Facebook groups, there are no newsletters to subscribe to stay in that world. In a problem-solution business, you constantly have to chase after a new customer. Versus an enthusiast market, you can acquire a customer once and sell to that same customer over and over again. So an example of an enthusiast market would be something like guitar. Someone learns how to play guitar, they want to be in that market for years. They're buying music, they're buying instruments, they're buying equipment. Dogs is another great market. So if you serve dog owners, you get someone who brings a puppy into their home, and then they buy all the things you know what it's like when you buy, if you've got a dog and know anybody who has a dog, you've got doggy bowls, doggy treats, doggy crates, doggy clothes, doggy Christmas ornaments. I mean, people spend crazy amounts of money on their pets. The market serving entrepreneurs is another great example. People who are entrepreneurs tend to be entrepreneurs for years and years and years. So those are examples of enthusiast markets. But it's not enough to be in an evergreen and an enthusiast market. You have to solve market must-have number 3, which is an urgent problem in the context of that evergreen and enthusiast market. What do I mean by that? Well, if you go into the doggy market, for example, you can't go into that market and expect to have a ton of success if you're going to sell something like doggy mugs, right? Nobody wakes up in the middle of the night and says, honey, we got to get this doggy mug tonight, tomorrow. What you're looking for is what we call a $10,000 problem, a burning problem that people need to solve right here, right now. An example in the dog market would be a dog peeing on the rug. You bring a new puppy home and the dog pees on the rug, pees on the sofa, pees on the clothing, pees on the bed. It reaches a boiling point where you say, enough is enough. We've got to solve this thing now. A story I share in the book is Dana Obelman and her husband. They help parents with young kids get their kids to sleep through the night. That's a perfect example. If you've ever had young kids at home, you know what it's like when you're trying to get some sleep and nobody's getting any sleep in the house. That's a problem. That's a $10,000 problem. So that's market must-have number 3. Number 4 is a market that has what we call future problems. Now, when you solve that first $10,000 problem for someone, you have this opportunity to become their trusted advisor for life. If you help someone, if you're the dog whisperer, and you help someone get their dog to become potty trained, the only question they have is, hey, my dog's barking. How do I get her to stop barking? Or my dog's pulling on the leash. How do I help her with this thing? What you're looking for is a market where when you help someone become successful in that first thing that you help them with, that success leads to a new problem. So in the entrepreneurship market, we'll take that for example. Once you choose your market and decide what business to start, the next question that you might be asking is, well, how do I figure out what to sell? Then once you have success selling that product, you might be saying, I'm doing all the work myself. How do I hire my first employee to get some help? So every level of success leads to a future problem that you have the opportunity to solve. So that's number 4. Number 5 is what we call PWMs. So I first learned this phrase from the late, great Gary Halbert, who's largely regarded as one of the greatest direct response copywriters of all time. Now, PWM stands for Players with Money. You want to find a market where you have people who spend a disproportionate amount of their income in that area of their life. Now, it's not to say you're selling to billionaires or millionaires, but you're looking for an area that people spend a disproportionate amount of their money in that area. So for example, golf is a classic example. If you know anybody who plays golf, they spend crazy amounts of money on golf equipment, golf instruction, golf trips, vacations, and so forth. Wine is another great example. People who are fans of wine will spend a ton of money in that area of their life. Dogs, another great example. If you have a dog, I mean, gosh, our little 4.5-pound Chihuahua, the amount of money we spend pound for pound on that little girl is incredible. And so you're looking for something like that. You're looking for evidence of PWMs. So, evergreen market, enthusiast market, urgent problem, future problems, and PWMs.
That's great. Okay, even as you're going through this, I'm thinking of some of my own businesses and thinking A+, C-. So those 5 things were just one of the 7. Tell us a couple of more.
So the 5 market must-haves are one of the characteristics, and I'll give you a couple more. So one of the things that we also did when we looked at each of our businesses is we looked at the keyword volume in each of those businesses to analyze market size. And what we found was one of the most striking discoveries of my entire life. We looked at all of our successful businesses, and we found that the keyword search volume, in other words, the size of the market as measured by Google Trends, a free tool, was all within a very narrow range. And every single one of our failed businesses was either too big or too small. And so one of the things that we debated literally for months is we said, should we reveal what those keywords are? Should we reveal what our most successful markets were and what those keywords were? And what we decided to do in the book was reveal it all. We decided to share exactly what those keywords were so you could take your keyword in your business and measure it against those benchmark keywords and see if your business is either too big, too small, or right inside what we call the market size sweet spot. So that's another one of the factors.
So just for someone who's watching this that might not know, explain what a keyword is.
So one of the things I teach is the importance of identifying what's called your bullseye keyword. Now, your bullseye keyword is a keyword that describes the thing that people would be searching for online that represents the transformation or process that you help people through in their business. I'll give you an example. One keyword would be orchid care. Orchid care represents the bullseye keyword in our orchid care business because we help people care for their orchids, as in the flower. Another example, memory improvement. We help people improve their memory through a series of techniques and courses that we offer that are designed to train and improve your memory. So those are examples of bullseye keywords. They represent words that people would type into a search engine like Google that represent what they're looking for help with, that represents what you help people with in your business. So when we looked at all of our bullseye keywords in market after market, we studied all of our clients' businesses. And we looked at what was it that separated those that were successful against those that were not successful. We found that market size was incredibly important. When it comes to tossing your boat in the river, you don't want a river that's too big because you're going to be swallowed up whole. You don't want a river that's too small because there's just not enough current to move you forward. You want a river that is just right. And in the book, we reveal exactly what that size is. So that's market size. Now, another factor that I think is really important is this conversation around competition. Now, competition is interesting. When I talk to people who are at the stage of just starting their business, trying to figure out what business to go into, inevitably it leads in one of several directions. People have an idea, they get super excited about it, so they go online, they do some searching, and they say, crap, somebody's already doing it. They close the door to the idea. Or they come up with an idea, they go online, and they say, nobody's doing this. We're going to get rich. This is great. And the reality is both of those situations are problematic for different reasons. One of my mentors taught me this phrase that's always stuck with me, and I'll share it here. And he said, Ryan, remember this. Pioneers get shot, but settlers get rich. What he meant by that is you do not want to be the first to market. You don't want to be the first one to try to sell something or figure something out online. If nobody's doing the thing that you're thinking of doing, chances are with the 7-8 billion people on the planet, listen, you're not the first person to have that idea. Chances are someone else tried it and wasn't able to make it work. Instead, what you're looking for is this. If you look at the most iconic companies of our time, you look at Google, you look at Facebook, you look at Apple, none of them were the first to market. Google was not the first search engine. Facebook was not the first social media platform, and Apple was not the first to sell smartphones or MP3 players. Instead, what they found is they found a market that was proven, and they either built a better mousetrap or they did a better job with their messaging and marketing. So the secret is this. You want to find a market where your competition is succeeding in spite of itself. That is the secret recipe.
So especially from your vantage point, where you have not only your own experience, good and bad, but also your clients
Right.
and all the people that you've worked with. You've got a pretty good view. So how does someone choose their business as there's a pretty big market to choose from?
When it comes to figuring out what type of business to start, a lot of people I talk to get overwhelmed because it feels like there are a million options out there. Do you start an e-commerce business where you're selling physical products online? Do you open up a physical storefront? Do you set up a restaurant in your local town? Do you build an agency where you're helping people with something like social media or marketing or photography? It feels like there are a million options out there. But in my experience, I've found that there's one business model that I recommend starting with, and it's selling education and expertise. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the education and expertise market, what we mean by that is selling everything from books, courses, to doing coaching, consulting, to live events and virtual events, to building membership sites online. Here's a crazy stat for you. Did you know that over $450 million a day is spent on education online? Courses, books, ebooks. Isn't that crazy? $500 million a day. Now, the reason why I love this model so much and I advocate it, especially if you're a bootstrapped entrepreneur, meaning you're funding your business yourself, which was me. I funded our business with $5,000 in savings. That's how I got everything going to build a $10 million a year business, is because when you sell education and expertise, the margins are incredibly high. If you sell a course online, a digital course for $100, for all intents and purposes, that's $100 in profit. Versus if you sell a $100 watch or a physical product, you might only make $10 or $15 on that $100 sale. So the margins are incredibly high. Startup costs, incredibly low. You can just use your iPhone, start filming yourself, and you have the makings of your own course. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need to fly to China to go to manufacturing facilities and build prototypes and deal with import-export, have inventory and stock where you've got a warehouse worth of stuff. You could create the thing today and start selling it tomorrow. Now, whenever I bring up this idea of education and expertise, people inevitably say, I don't have any expertise. What about me? Well, I'll answer that a few different ways. This is another thing one of my mentors once taught me. He said, Ryan, remember this. To the fourth grader, the fifth grader is a genius. Think about that. You don't need to be a PhD or have that level of expertise to teach somebody else something. Think about it. If you've ever had someone reach out to you and say, hey, can you help me with this? Can I ask for your advice on this? You don't necessarily need to be a world-class expert in that space. You just need to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of your students, your clients. So that's the first thing. Second thing is this. If you have no desire to be the expert yourself, there's a world of experts to partner with, to hire. Let's take a look at what we're doing right here, right? We're bringing on world-class experts in the form of this project right here to talk on their area of expertise. There's nothing stopping you from doing something just like what we're doing right now. So whether you have expertise or don't have expertise, whether you have a desire to be an expert or not, education and expertise, over $450 million a day being spent online. I think about how much this is exploding. When I went to college 15, 20 years ago, cost of college that I went to was $40,000 a year. Same college today, over $80,000 a year. It's an exploding industry right now in all areas of the world. So I advocate that type of business above and beyond anything else.
Let's go up a level. One time I was asked a question, can entrepreneurship be taught? And the answer was yes, as long as you're teaching it to an entrepreneur. Do you think everyone should do this? How's it broken down for you?
So when it comes to deciding if this is the path for you or not, here are a few things that I know. I know that right here, right now, over half of all American adults, over 50% of every American adult wants to be their own boss, wants to do their own thing, wants to be in control of their own destiny. Whether or not they have the capability to do that or not, I know if you were to talk to 2 people, one of them wants to do it. The other thing that I've learned along the way in my research and literally working with thousands of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs, many people who are just like me, where I was a few short years ago, working in a cubicle, working in a job, having a daily commute, and wanted a better path for my life, wanted to do something more. I was at that place where I felt like I had more to give. I felt like there was more to me to contribute. And I felt like that I was living in this box and I was constrained and I wanted to take a chance. I know there are a lot of people out there that are in that situation that they feel there's got to be something more than this. That's exactly where I was. And I've found that when it comes to virtually all people who desire to launch their own business, there are 4 types of entrepreneurs. The first type of entrepreneur is what we call a mission-based entrepreneur. Now, mission-based entrepreneurs typically have a mission that they're drawn to. They have a wrong in the world that they want to right. They have a cause that they would die on a hill for. It might be eliminating cancer. It might be eliminating bullying, but something negative in the world that they want to fix. Now, the mission-based entrepreneur is in contrast with the passion-based entrepreneur. Now, passion-based entrepreneurs have something that they love, that they want to move the world toward, whether it's playing guitar, whether it's watercolor painting, whether it's fly fishing. They've got something that is a passion of theirs that they want to turn into a vocation. Now, we've got mission and passion-based, but we also have just opportunity-based entrepreneurs. Now, there are many people in this world that don't have that mission they die for, or that lifelong passion that they want to make into their vocation. But they're the type of person who looks around and says, how is it that nobody's solved this problem before? They're entrepreneurs in the most classic sense of the word. And the fourth type was actually my type, which is the undecided entrepreneur. There are a lot of people that know they want to be their own boss, start their own thing, but they look around and they say, I just don't know what I should do. That's the exact situation that I was in when I launched my first business. And the tip I'll share with you if you're an undecided entrepreneur is this: start with a practice business. If you think about when you first learned how to drive, most of us didn't learn how to drive in our dream car. We learned how to drive in an old beater that could get a few scratches on it, get a few dents on it. But in that journey, we learn the process. We learn the skill. And just like with starting with a practice business, you can learn the skills to get things off the ground, learn how to ask your customers what they want, learn how to create your first product, learn how to build your website and write emails, and do things like Facebook and Google and all the skills you need to acquire to build your business. And then with that, that can transform eventually into that business that is a passion of yours. When I first went into the how to teach people how to care for their orchid business, the orchid care space, I knew that wasn't my mission. I knew that wasn't my passion. It wasn't an opportunity that was tremendously powerful, but it was a practice business for me. Now, heck, that little practice business went on to make $500,000 a year, so you never know where your practice business is going to take you. Now, what's interesting about each of these 4 types, and I invite you as you're hearing me describe these to think about which one best describes you. Maybe you're a combination of more than one, but each one has a light side as well as a shadow side. So mission-based entrepreneurs, and be aware of what your shadow side might be. Mission-based entrepreneurs tend to struggle with charging money for what they do. They're so passionate about their mission. They're so passionate toward helping people that they struggle actually selling. Passion-based entrepreneurs tend to be blind to the fact that the thing that they're passionate about may not be something that has opportunity to profit from. In other words, they're fueling their soul, but they're not filling their bank account. Opportunity-based entrepreneurs struggle with finding something that can make money, but they have no love for it. It's a hollow process. It's nothing that there's drawing them to it. And so over time, they can lose passion and interest in it and wonder, why did I start this in the first place? And the undecided entrepreneur struggles with analysis paralysis, overthinking things, struggling to come up with what that thing is, and constantly staying in that space of brainstorming and talking about it and thinking about it, but never actually taking action. So it's a process that begins with self-discovery. It begins with understanding yourself, understanding who you are, so you can ultimately move forward and build a business that will serve you.
I love this framework, and I love that you added the shadow side to this. It's so important. Kind of in that vein, you and I have seen people flame out, but we're here in your home, and you have a long-term marriage and kiddos that you are raising, and you seem to have figured out the balance in the equation. What advice would you have for someone who's on the entrepreneurial journey, who gets tugged in too many directions and is out of balance?
For someone who's in the middle of their entrepreneurial journey, I would say a few things. Number 1, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 11. I think there's an epidemic where we see success. We see people putting their front stage out there on social media. You see the absolute best of what's going on, but you don't see their backstage. You don't see the hard yards that they've walked, that they've run behind the scenes, right? I've got 2 kids. I love my 2 boys. They're my world. I've been married for over a decade. I've been with my wife for nearly 20 years. We're college sweethearts. We met freshman year of college. We've been together. We started our business together. We've been through the hard years, the ramen noodle and bologna sandwich days with the mattress on the floor, living in an apartment with bars on a window. So we've been through it all. She comes from a family of immigrants from Mexico. Her grandmother came to this country, could not speak a word of English, could not read or write. She went on to get a PhD. So there is a lot of work behind the scenes to make something like that happen, and you don't see it. One of the things that I've learned along the way is if you have someone that you've identified as a mentor, the key is this: don't necessarily study what they're doing right now. Study what they did when they were at the same stage you're at right now. So don't study what Mark Cuban is doing today. Study what Mark Cuban did when he was living in a car and he was trying to make his first sale. That's what it takes. That's the secret. And so don't compare yourself to what you see out there. And when you're studying a mentor, make sure you study them in the right way.
That's terrific. Let's wrap with the spiritual side of this. I like the thing that drove you further was your desire to share and lift people up. Would you speak to that as far as building an entrepreneurial income and the impact that could have?
So I think for most entrepreneurs, I can certainly speak for myself, there's this interesting duality. In many ways, I'm driven by impact. But the shadow side that I'm self-aware enough to know about is that I've always had a challenge with feeling like I haven't measured up. And I talk about this in my book. I share stories growing up, how I was doing the spelling bee. When I was in 4th grade, on a whim, I decided to do the spelling bee. Competed against all the 4th graders. Then I won all the 4th graders. I competed against all the 5th graders. Beat all the 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders. I'm 9 years old. I beat everyone in my school. So I go to states. 9 years old, competing against teenagers. I spell perspicacity. I spell cerulean. 3rd round comes up. My word, sandal. I messed it up. Screwed up on sandal. I tell this story in this book where I played soccer. That was my sport growing up, playing soccer. Captain of my high school soccer team. I get recruited to be in this ODP, Olympic Development League. I make 3 rounds of cuts, make this Olympic Development League. Squeak onto the team. First game, I sit the bench. Second game, I sit the bench. Third game, I sit the bench. 18 games, I don't play a minute. So I've constantly struggled with this feeling of succeeding at one level and not succeeding at the next level and not measuring up. Whilst at the same time knowing that I have something that I want to give, right? I shared this with my 2 boys. At the end of the book, I have a letter that I wrote to my 2 boys. And I asked my publisher, I said, can I include this letter? Because I think it's so important. And in this letter, it's advice that I want to leave to my boys. And I say, listen, entrepreneurship is not about measuring up. Entrepreneurship is all about one thing. It's about momentum. It's about progress, not perfection. It's about enjoying the ride. It's about moving forward in spite of that fear. My parents taught me one thing that has stuck with me more than anything else. They didn't go to college. They didn't have successful businesses. But they taught me one thing. They said, all you need in this world is 2 ingredients: courage and grit. Courage is about doing the things that scare the crap out of you in spite of that fear. And grit is picking yourself off the ground when you skin your knees, because you are going to skin those knees. So in this letter to my boys, I share some advice, and 2 things that I share with them is this: leave it all on the field, but more importantly, live and love fully. And what that means is give it everything you've got. Leave it all on the field, but even more important than that, if you're focused on the future, if you're focused on that next milestone, making $1 million, having your first $1 million day, those days, they come and go. In a moment, they give you satisfaction. But if you want to do this for the long term, it's about momentum. Leave it all on the field. Live and love fully. And that's how you build a business and a life that lasts.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
At this point in my life, I've had multiple conversations with Ryan, and every time I do, I learn something. What I love about him is his energy and his desire to share what he knows with other people so that he can lift them into greater wealth and prosperity. That's what he's all about. He's an amazing individual, and I was very privileged to have this interview. Well, that completes bonus episode 10 of Money Revealed 2020. We are not going to be airing an 11th episode here, although there is one as a bonus in the packages if you would have checked that out. So I just want to remind you, we're still in the free viewing period, which means that the discounts, the bonuses, there's a lot of things here for you. If you haven't investigated this yet, just take the time. Within 2 or 3 minutes, you could take a look and see everything that there is to offer. It's probably a lot more affordable than you think, and it's something that pays dividends. This is a no-brainer. One small idea from this entire series more than pays for our biggest and best package. So this, to me, is really a no-brainer. Would love for you to jump in and own this. And if you have purchased already, thank you for purchasing. I very much appreciate it. It means a lot to us. It really has been an honor and a privilege to take this journey with you. We covered a lot of ground, and I wanted to deliver to you on the highest possible level that I could. And I believe that we succeeded in that realm. Thanks so much for being here with me, and I look forward to a prosperous future with you.